Hello dear viewers, I'm glad to see you and read you on my channel mainly dedicated to the history of Ukraine from the perspective of languages, including Ukrainian, and the history of the Ukrainian language itself. As some of you may recall, from my two first videos, we have deciphered about a dozen Scythian words, and most of them have turned out to be Ukrainian, or broadly speaking, Slavic. We have analyzed a dozen Khazar, Bulgarian, Avar, and Hunnic titles in total, and each of them has appeared to be a Slavic name. We have shown that various toponyms in Ukraine and on some historical Ukrainian lands that for some unclear reason are supposed to be Turkic have been simply disfigured by some authors and simply consist of Ukrainian words. We have shown that some names of locations and those of people known among the so-called Khazars are also Ukrainian. We have shown in many examples that the so-called Scythian language and the so-called Khazar language have nothing to do with any Indo-Iranian nor a Turkic language, and so forth. Given all that, we have proved that Philip Orlik had a defensible reason to derive the Cossacks from the Khazars, as he wrote in his 1710 Ukrainian constitution. And in this video, we will show that he also had a defensible reason to derive the Cossacks from the Gets, as the same constitution reads. In the previous video, I've announced several topics that I planned to include in this video, but I wrongly estimated the amount of material I had. It turned out to be too much. I think you've already noticed that this video is much longer than either of the previous two. That's a partial result of that big amount. And some other topics that I didn't expect I would be ever immersing myself in are just impossible to avoid. So for this reason, I've had to cover only a couple of them. But I believe you watch my channel to know something new, not because of some couple of topics. This something new will be presented in this video and will be not less interesting than what I planned before. In front of you is a fragment from Moses Khorenatsy's Geography you already observed in the previous video about the Khazar language. In this piece, we'll pay attention to the following things. First, to the river Etel, or if we follow the way of pronunciation suggested by the classical Armenian text, Etil, whose ancient name is Ra, and which is referred to as the river Volga by a translator. But that's a mistaken point, and we will show why. The second thing is the Hunnic city of Varachan, which for some reason was transliterated into Latin as Varasania. These names will be in our list of words to decipher. We will start our investigation from the document known as the Schechter letter, or the Cambridge document, which we already partly analyzed. The value of this document is that it contains several Slavic words related not just to Khazaria, but in particular to Rus, Ruthenia as well. And these words will be what we will start from because they follow the patterns we will find in the Khazar names in this and another video. In the passage shown on the screen, Solomon Schechter lists peoples that rose up against the men of Khazaria. One of these peoples, or nations as specified in the translation, was a people of some Painil. Why Solomon Schechter has transliterated this word Painil and not Pinil is not clear because the Hebrew Yod can refer either to the phoneme I, the phoneme I, the phoneme E, or the phoneme E, but not A. Moreover, in this article of his, titled An Unknown Khazar Document, he has confirmed that he hasn't been able to identify what this Painil means, but has assumed that it could be connected to the tribe of Polans. Another assumption has been made by the Semitologist Pavel Konstantinovich Kakavtsov, who has translated the Khazar correspondence cycle into Russian. He has supposed that this tribe refers to the Pechenegs. I have a version that seems to be more adequate than the previous ones of what place this Pinil, not Painil, refers to. First, we will try to identify the sense of this toponym. We understand that Il, Ilya are some of the standard Ukrainian endings, at least. In Ukrainian dictionaries, we can find the verb pinyati, meaning to flood. Then, we may assume that Pinil, or Pinil in Ukrainian, may be somewhere near the land of Macedon, though not necessarily. To attribute the land of Pinil to some location, we will not be looking for a country specifically named, but for a toponym in general, until we find the Bulgarian city of Plovdiv. According to the English wiki article about Plovdiv, it's called the Bulgarian city of the Seven Hills. Another city of the Seven Hills is Rome. To simplify, it means that this city was likely a capital for some period in olden days and played some crucial role in the state. And Wiki confirms this point. It was the capital of the Roman province of Thracia, and since then, it became a capital several times in different states. Let's bear this number in mind, 7. This article also reads that Plovdiv is situated on the Maritsa River. Then, in the section Etymology, it relates the modern name of the city to the one mentioned by Jordanes, Pulpudeva, which in the view of some authors may mean Lake City in Thracian, and reads that, since the 9th century, Plovdiv was known as Plodiv or Plovdiv, Pladiv, Pladin, and so on. The name Plovdiv could be originally spelled with the Greek combination omicron upsilon, which could be read as O, or U. In Slavic languages, there is the word plod and or ones similarly spelled and or pronounced. In Bulgarian, the term plod means fruit or crop, and ploden means fruiting. And here is the first connection with the flood. These two words may share the same root. The phonemes p and f may interchange language by language, like in the following pairs: the English fire against the Greek pyr, and the English flame against the Ukrainian polumya. Flood is a huge amount of water. More water is a bigger crop. But if we additionally read a description of the Maritsa River, we will find out one more connection. The lower course of the river Maritsa, Evros, is very vulnerable to flooding. For about 4 months every year, the lowlands around the river are flooded. This causes significant economic damage, which is estimated at several hundreds million euro. The name Maritsa can be associated with the ancient Greek Martios and Polish Marzec, both meaning March, the first month of spring. It's a time when sheets of ice on rivers start melting and snowfall is changing into rains. So Pinil could be just one more name for the Bulgarian state applied by the Khazars. Next two words that should be deciphered are found in the following fragment in the Schechter letter. And from that day there fell the fear of Khazaria upon the nations which surrounded them. And also in the days of my lord, the king Joseph, when there was the persecution in the days of the wicked Romanus, and the matter became known to my lord, he trod down many of the uncircumcised. But Romanus, the wicked, sent great gifts to Helgo, the king of Rus. In the text improperly, Russia properly will be Rus, Ruthenia, and enticed him for his own evil. And he came in the night upon the province of the Severians, and took it by deception, for the commander, the head of the princes, was not there. But when the matter became known to Bolushche, improperly Bulshatsi, explained in the previous video, or Pesach, the Riviera, he marched against the cities of Romanus in fierce anger, and smote both man and woman. And he took 3 cities, besides the hamlets very many, and from there he marched against Shorshu, and fought against it. How Solomon Schechter produced Severians is a big mystery, from the word which is clearly spelled from right to left with Samek, Mem, Bet, Resh, and 2 Yod letters at the end. This word more likely can be read as Samburi, that is Sambori or Samborians in English, and referred to the Ukrainian city of Sambir in Lviv Oblast, or something located nearby. After the Khazar general Bolushche marched against the Byzantine cities, he then moved to a place whose name starts with Shorshu. Solomon Schechter guesses that this word has 2 extra letters which are missed in the document, Nun and Vav. That is, the whole word might be somewhat of Shorshuno. This Shorshuno is mentioned separately after the cities of Romanus, which makes us think that this location was outside the Byzantine Empire, and maybe north of the Bulgarian Empire, because the Khazar general marched against Shorshuno, and people that lived in the Bulgarian Empire probably were not a target of his anger. In Ukrainian dictionaries, we can find the word shurhit, meaning rustle, shurhotite, to rustle. The translations for these 2 words are taken from the English-Ukrainian English Dictionary of the Scientific Language, Physics and Related Sciences, Part 2, Ukrainian English, of Olga Kocherga and Yevhen Meinarovich from 2010. And Shershень, along with Chershun, meaning hornet. At the same time, according to the Dictionary of Russian Patois of Kuzbas, with an addendum from 2018, in the original Russian Словарь русских говоров Кузбасса с дополнением, the words Shorshun and Shorshun also mean hornet. This dictionary narrates that these patois were being developed starting from the 17th century under the influence of several languages, including Ukrainian, Belarusian, Polish, and others whose native speakers were exiled to this area, and of local Turkic languages. We will not be now analyzing in much detail in what way these 2 words emerged in these patois, but will say that they likely existed in the Russian or Ukrainian language in the period when the Cambridge document was composed. Shorshun or Shorshuniv as a supposed original name can be attributed to the present-day city of Chisinau in the Republic of Moldova, in Ukrainian Kishinev. The Ukrainian Kishite means to infest or to be infested, as reflected in the English-Ukrainian Dictionary and Handbook of Environmental Engineering of Timotei Balaban from 2000. The relevant links are found in the video's description. The verb kishite is commonly applied to insects, and thus the city of Chisinau can refer to the hornets we are looking for. The name could simply denote crowds of people. Today, the city is the capital of Moldova and is the largest in this republic. The Victor Romanus is a Byzantine emperor. Pavel Kakovtsov, in his Jewish-Khazar correspondence in the 10th century, in the original Russian Еврейско-Хазарская переписка в X веке from 1932, relates this Romanus to Romanus I Lecapenus, who started reigning in 919 and at the same time doubts about it. According to him, the Byzantine leader should have been a usurper to be called Vict, whereas Romanus I Lecapenus was a co-emperor to Constantine VII Flavius Porphyrogenitus, and thus could not be a usurper, as Pavel Kakovtsov explains. Another problem, which is more relevant, is that Helgu, who is believed to be the Knyaz Oleg or Oleg, the prophet, died in 912, before the reign of Romanus I. If the Victor Romanus is a usurper, a more probable candidate for this person is Romanus II. According to his biography, provided by the wiki community in the English version, in November 959, he succeeded his father on the throne amidst rumors that he or his wife had poisoned him. And then wiki continues, Romanus purged his father's courtiers of his enemies and replaced them with friends. All that resembles an act of the usurpation of power, and those rumors most likely were no rumors. What is also noteworthy is that Romanus II ruled for 4 years only. Quote, after a lengthy hunting expedition, Romanus II took ill and died on March 15, 963. Rumor attributed his death to poison administered by his wife Theophano, but there is no evidence of this. Unquote. Wikipedia doesn't report one more version of his death. The source wiki refers to, which is Synopsis of Histories of the Byzantine Greek historian George Cardenos, says that some of the contemporaries of Romanus II thought that his body was killed by pleasures he used to devote himself to, which means that Romanus II could lead a dissolute life. If the Victor Romanus is Romanus II, who is Helgu then? The only who could be this person is the regent Olga or Olga of Kiev. The period of her reign as a regent, 945-964, according to Nestor's chronicle, known as the Primary Chronicle, intersects with that of Romanus II, 959-963, and intersects with the reign of the Kovhan or the Big Joseph, who, according to scholars, ruled at least in around the 950s and 960s, whom the author of this document calls the Lord. It means that we can estimate the relations between Olga of Kiev and Romanus II described in the document as dating to the short period from 959 to 963. The most probable explanation, in my view, why the document's author mentioned Olga as a male person, even grammatical in Hebrew, is that the author or a copyist wanted to hide something. The phrase Romanus sent great gifts to Helgu and enticed him, once being interpreted as Romanus sent great gifts to Helga and enticed her like a man enticed a woman, speaks of a possible love affair of Romanus II with Olga of Kiev. And once having learned about this event, Khazar general Belushchi, in fierce anger, sent the troops he had at his disposal against the Byzantine Empire, which by his order started killing the Byzantines and took their 3 cities and many hamlets. In the following piece, we can find the conversation between Olga and Belushchi, which may explain why he was in fierce anger. We will only replace some words that make us wrongly think about Olga, Helga, as a male person. From them, he went out to battle against Helga, and he fought months, and God subdued her before Pesach, and she found of the plunder which she took from the Samborians. But she said, Romanus beguiled me to do this. Then Pesach said to her, if this be so, march against Romanus and fight against him as thou didst fight against me, and I will depart from thee. But if not, here I shall die or live until I shall have taken vengeance. And thus she marched against her own will and fought against Constantinople 4 months on sea, and her mighty men fell there. for the Macedonians prevailed over her by fire, and she fled, but was ashamed to return to her land. And she went to Persia by the sea, and she fell there, she and all her camp. Then the Russes, Ruthenians, became subdued under the hands of the Khazar. In this part, the word Samborians is spelled with the Hebrew Yod and Vav at the end. It seems to be written in the form of the Ukrainian genitive Samboriv or Samboriv that ends with the Ukrainian ending Iv. As for the Persia with the first Hebrew letter being Pe, Pavel Kakavtsov thinks that this word was disfigured from the original Tiras with the first Tav and Yod. If the name Tiras, which is the river Dniester, was really written in the original text, it would be spelled without any Yod, because the first vowel was different. The so-called Turas is the Hellenized Scythian name of the Dniester River, which we will be dealing with later in this video. This passage from the Khazar document suggests that Olha of Kiev died between 959 and 963, that is before the year of her death recorded in the primary chronicle, which is 969. The Ukrainian wiki article about Olha mentions that she lost power in 962 by referring to the Ukrainian translation of Continuatio Reginonis, a continuation of the chronicle of Benedictine monk Regino Promiensis, written by the first Archbishop of Magdeburg and missionary Adalbert of Magdeburg, also known as the Apostle of the Slavs. According to this translation, under the year 959, we can see a piece speaking of Helena, who is supposedly Olha of Kiev, as about the queen of the Rugians, in the original Latin Helena Regina Rugorum. The Rugians are generally believed to be a Germanic tribe, but this is a myth that will be debunked in this video. Under the year 962, the author of the continuation writes the following. In the same year, Adalbert, ordained a bishop for the Rugians, returned without having done anything of what he had been sent for, because he had seen that he had labored in vain. Some who had been with him had been killed, and he himself, with great difficulty, had scarcely escaped. When he met with the king, he was kindly received, and Archbishop Wilhelm, loved by God, received him as a brother and endowed him with all sorts of good and benefits in order to reward him for such a difficult journey he had mapped out for him. The Rugians, Russes or Ruthenians could not receive Adalbert because Olha was possibly outside Rus, Ruthenia. She could be already dead, and Rus itself was already subdued by the Khazars. In the primary chronicle, no event is recorded under the years from 956 to 963. Under the year 968, the chronicle reports that Olha, with her grandsons, was surrounded by the Pechenegs in Kiev. Under the year 969, Sviatoslav I, her son, tells his mother Olha that he doesn't like living in Kiev and wants to live in Pereyaslavets on the Danube. If Olha Helinger really made her way not to Persia, but to the river Turas, as was supposed by Pavel Kakavtsov, it means her camp, and she herself, should have died among the Pechenegs, but not in Rus, not in Kiev, as can be deduced from the Schechter letter. Whether she was killed, if killed at all, immediately by the Pechenegs once they found her camp, or they demanded something, if anything was requested from Sviatoslav to release her, is not clear. But Sviatoslav probably came into contact with the Pechenegs after Olha ended up amongst them. We don't know her destiny afterwards, if she had turned out alive. This presumptive course of events suggests that the primary chronicle has been falsified in this part under this period. The Khazar general Bolushchin could be a lover of Olha, who wanted to take his revenge on Romanos II. The Cambridge document only mentions the reaction of this general and that he was the one who sent the troops, but doesn't mention the King Joseph in this part at all. Based on Solomon Schechter's interpretation, the Khazar general is called the head of the princes in the document. The same document also reads that there was a title, the Great Prince, in Khazaria. Such authors as Ibn Rusta and Al-Mas'udi wrote in the 10th century that the only person in Khazaria who was allowed to possess troops and wasn't held accountable to anyone but himself for how he could use them was the Byk, the second king in the country besides the Kovhan. And if Bolushchin had this army and was the Great Prince of Khazaria, he was the Byk, and the King Joseph was the Kovhan. Romanos II possibly was indeed poisoned for either of two reasons or even both. Alternatively, he could die of a venereal infection rooted in his lifestyle. Having become the emperor, Romanos II, as the same wiki article about him reads, to appease his bespelling wife, excused his mother, Empress Helena, from court and forced his 5 sisters into convents. It can be interpreted that his wife Theophana was jealous on the one hand, but on the other, even if she was not, she could have considered the affair of her husband with Olga as infidelity, and thus she was one of those who could desire to get him poisoned. But there was also a second, collective player who could do the same. To Romanus II's persecution of the Jews in the Byzantine Empire, the Kohan Joseph responded symmetrically by trotting down many of the uncircumcised in Caesarea, but he didn't send any army. The Byzantine elite, the circle of Romanus, didn't expect that his politics would result in Khazar soldiers killing civilians on their land, so they could make a decision to depose such an emperor. For the big Volushchi, called by the Khazar author the Reverer, according to Solomon Schechter, or the Revered, according to Pavel Kakavtsov, possibly in order to present him as a knight or to highlight it, the deed he committed was disgraceful. He had a relationship with a widow who then, being ashamed after the battle against Constantinople because she lost it, couldn't return home, who presumably died afterwards, and all this happened because of this quote-unquote noble person. That's what the Khazar author didn't want to write about. To do it is to bring shame on Khazaria, and now we better understand what was next. Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin is credited with the following lines about the Khazars. Oleg the Prophet is now going to take revenge on the unreasonable Khazars. Why Pushkin called them unreasonable is what nobody could understand. But what is clear is that the author of these lines didn't much like them, definitely. To understand this piece, we'll probably need to replace the name Oleg the Prophet with Sviatoslav the Brave. And now I will express my guess. The Khazar general, the great prince, the knight, and the big of Khazaria, with the pronounced name Volushchi, which means in the Ukrainian language causing others pain, was its gravedigger. His act brought Romanus II to his poisoning and Olga of Kiev to her death or distress. Sviatoslav I of Kiev indeed took revenge on Khazaria. He avenged the death of his mom. In reprisal for her death, Sviatoslav brought Khazaria to its end. That was the price of the big Volushchi's mistake. Khazaria disappeared from the political map. Its lands were subdued by the Russes. As Grigory Konitsky or Georgy Kanitsky writes in his The History of the Russes, the wars described by some writers of the Slavs against the Pechenegs, the Polovtsi, the Khazars, and other Slavic peoples unreservedly claimed foreigners mean no more than internecine battles of the Slavs against one another for regional borders, for transhumance, and for other claims and quarrels of knyazes they themselves used to make. That the Russes got control over Khazaria is confirmed by Ibn Hawkal in the 10th century. But the Khazars did not disappear. Either Khazaria was simply incorporated into Rus, or the Khazars just started paying tribute to the Russes, and they pretty much understood one another. They both spoke either one language, or two languages resembling two dialects of one, such as the Russian and the Ukrainian language. Sarkel, or to be accurate, Sadibel, was neither completely destroyed, and we'll be speaking of this Khazar city too, but in another video. In the Schechter letter, we found a name probably related to the city of Sambir. There are several interpretations suggested for this word that are known today, but I will add one that was likely not even considered by anybody. To find the sense of the name, we should understand where it comes from. In the medieval age, and even in the early modern age, there was a knowledge that one of the names of the Carpathian Mountains was Sembor. For instance, Jan Yuri Ignaz Stradovsky, who was a historian and a Catholic priest, in his book Sacred History of Moravia, 1710, writes that the Mount Zabor, located near the city of Nitra, today's Nitra being a city in Slovakia, was known by the name of Sembor, Sobor, Sambor. As the author notes, the name Zobor, I guess here there should be Zabor as well as in the main text, was given to this mount by the Hungarians. On Hungarian Wiktionary, we can find that the word Zabor exists in such a Finno-Ugric language as Erzian, in the sense of fence, and in such a quote-unquote East Slavic language as Russian, which is so East and so Slavic that its native speakers copied and pasted the word Zabor into their language without any change. Even the original meaning is kept, fence. I believe some of you got the idea behind the joke. The Finno-Ugric word Zabor is present in the Russian language because the Muscovites themselves, as the indigenous people, belonged by origin to the Finno-Ugric peoples. Although the Russian language is Slavic, the idea to classify it as East Slavic causes nothing but laughter. The Finno-Ugric name Zabor meaning fence, pretty well applies to the Carpathian Mountains. If the name Sembor denotes something similar, the closest word would be the Polish proper noun Siembor, being a variant of Siembor. Siembor consists of the reflexive pronoun sie and the verb bożyć, and thus corresponds to the Polish się bożyć or bożyć się. On English Wiktionary, we can find that the Old Polish bożyć, or I would assume bożyć się, means to fight, to battle, as well as the Ukrainian boroty się. Defense and the fighting are contextually related terms. We can also pay attention to another Ukrainian word, boronity się, meaning to defend oneself, which may share the same root with the word boroty się. In addition, we can even note that the English fence and defense share the same root as well, but that's less important. The Carpathian Mountains were named Sembor or Sambor, possibly because they defended or separated those who lived at the one side of the mountains from those who lived at the opposite side. If that was the case, the city of Sambir just received its name due to its relative proximity. In that event, the name Sembor and Sambor would mean the same. The Slavic sam and the Polish się, roughly speaking, are both translated into the English suffix self. Before I realized it, I actually had another option. I will express the second hypothesis too, as we will deal with the Khazar toponym of the same pattern in another video. In the 1673 Mirrors for Princes, or Fürstenspiegel, of the Bohemian jurist Johann Jakob von Weingarten, we can find a mention of the Mount Sembor and its two alternative names, Sobor and Sembri. The latter even more closely resembles today's name of Sambir. Here we should note that Johann Jakob von Weingarten, as well as the previous author, mentions this mount when relating the events of the 9th century. Another event he mentions is 7 Hunnic armies having reached the borders of Pannonia, near the domains of Svatopluk I of Moravia, and what I thought after I found this passage was that this Sembor should be interpreted as the Ukrainian Semibori, consisting of the Ukrainian Sim, 7, and Bir, pine forest. A place's name similar in structure can be found in present-day Belarus. It's the village of Syami-Sosny, literally meaning 7 pine trees. Can we connect the 7 Hunnic armies to some 7 pine trees is not clear, and is neither expected. However, the number 7 was really present in the life of the Slavic tribes, and not only. The Syrians had 7 gods. The Avars and the Bulgarians had 7 persons bearing the title Tarhan, Tarkan or Vul, each of which, as you remember, roughly means ox, and so on and so forth, including cities of the 7 hills, etc. But a noteworthy point we can deduce from this passage is that the Huns didn't become extinct in the 9th century, which makes one more time the idea of their quote-unquote Indo-Iranian or even Mongolian origin completely delusional. In the same book, we'll read one more piece preceding the one just quoted. The king knew nothing about the quantity of the Huns, and wrongly believed that they, or more specifically, the barbarians, dealt with cattle as if they trained themselves to war, and looked for a place in Pannonia, for example, where in the vast fields they could graze their cattle named Rosan. If you know German and think that my translation is inaccurate, you can leave a comment with a proper translation. The German word Leute with H, whose meaning apparently remained unknown till this moment, can be easily confused with the word Leute without H, which means people. In Poland, there are several toponyms called Lutynia in Polish. In German, they all are known by the name Leuten with the German H. At the same time, the Old Polish adjective Luty means fierce. That's why I've translated the German noun Leute as barbarians. Interestingly, Slavic barbarians. But I paid your attention to this sentence for a different reason. We will now attempt to uncover the sense of the names Rus, Ruthenia, Rugians, and even Roxolani. In the Latin language, there is the word Rus, meaning country, and this sense is what is kept in the Ukrainian name of Ukraine, Ukraina. The Ukrainian words Ukraina and Kraina, both as well as the Latin Rus, mean country. They both have the same etymology. The noun Kraina etymologically relates to the verb krayati, whereas the noun Ukraina relates to the verb ukrayati. The latter, as the hypothesis, already exists. The only difference between these two verbs is the aspect. Krayati is an imperfect verb. Ukrayati is perfect. Krayati means to cut out, or to be cutting out, while ukrayati means to have cut off. Such meanings come from the root krai. Krai, being a noun, can be translated as edge, but also as country. That is, the nouns Kraina and Ukraina denote a piece of land having certain or specified boundaries that make it separate from the adjacent territories or regions. It should not be necessarily a country. That's why in some primary sources one can find the adjectives Ukrainny, Ukrainny, roughly meaning of state importance, applied to cities, because Ukrayety can be interpreted as to give some region a special status, to distinguish it from the rest. When this word applies to a country, it signifies that the country has the borders which cannot be crossed without permission or without awareness. But is Rus a Latin name? Don't jump to conclusions. A reverse translation of the verb to cut is rizati, whose root riz most probably corresponds to the Latin rus. In Ukrainian dictionaries, we can find the term riza, denoting a 3, 6 or 10 morgen parcel of land. One morgen was about not less than 2,000 square meters. So the Ukrainian root riz, the same as the Latin rus, refers to some limited piece of territory which is cut off from other lands. But what is truly interesting is that one more word which possibly contains the same root is the Ukrainian name of Christmas, Rizdvo. Interesting because the Russian counterpart of this day's name is Ruzdvo, with the root Ruz. We are now referring to the Carpathian Russian to Russian online dictionary on slovnyk.rueportal.eu. The dictionary is not complete and is not always precise. That is, the name Rus can simply be the Russian Ruz, meaning country, and can derive from the assumed archaic Russian verb ruzati, meaning to cut. And that may explain why the Bavarian geographer mentioned the Russes by the name of Ruzi with a double Z. But that's not all. We have said that the Ukrainian root riz relates to cutting, but this sense can lead us to the thought that the same root may be connected to some sharp object. An example of such a sharp object is a horn, which, as you already know, is translated into the Ukrainian rig, in plural rogi. But we haven't said yet, until now, that what is called rig in the Ukrainian language, in the Russian language, is called rug, in plural rogi, and in Polish rug, in plural rogi. And this word, in theory, may connect the term Russes with the term Rugians. Moreover, the Bavarian geographer by the name Ruzi could even record the hypothetical Russian word Ruzi, that in theory could be the dual or plural form of the Russian rug, producing the meaning two horns or many horns, respectively. When Johann Jakob von Weingarten was writing that the Huns named their cattle Rosan, he, roughly speaking, confirmed that the name of the Hunnic cattle is derived from the word rig, rug, horn, sort of rozhane, rozhany, denoting the cattle that have horns on their head. The thing is that in English, as well as in German, apparently there is no term that would specifically denote horned cattle. What is called rogata hudoba in Ukrainian, literally horned cattle, is usually translated just as cattle. The words of Johann Jakob von Weingarten indicate that the Rugians, which are rugi or rogi in Latin, rogoi in Greek, could be cattle breeders or cattlemen. That's not the only inference we can try to draw from his words, but let's take things one step at a time. Having opened the English wiki article about the Rugians, we will find the following line. The name of the Rugi continued to be used after the 6th century to refer to Slavic-speaking peoples, including even Russians. We definitely have to replace the word Russians, which denotes people that didn't exist in the days of the Rugians nor a long time afterwards, with the adequate term Russes or Ruthenians. Otherwise, this sentence makes no sense. In other words, makes nonsense. Tacitus, in his Germanium, as scholars believe, placed them near the Baltic Sea, roughly in today's Pomerania, being located on the territory of today's Poland and Germany. In his work, the Rugians are mentioned along with the Lemovii, and they both, according to him, carried round shields and short swords. A short sword can be associated with a knife, and we can recall that the Ukrainian term Cossack, most likely being cognate with the Ukrainian Kozak, in English Cossack, means large knife. It doesn't say much about the Rugians or the Lemovii yet, but there is a thing that we can notice. For some reason, and that's really strange, the Lemovii are believed to be a Germanic tribe. Maybe those who still believe it don't know, but the ending ovi is clearly Slavic, in the context of Europe. A similar ending, oviem, exists in modern Polish, and signifies the grammatical plurality. The Lemovii, the root being lem, may refer to the people today called Lemkos, in Polish, Lemkovia, an ethnic group living in Carpathian Ruthenia or Zakarpattia. The Lemovii or Lemovians probably dwelt near the Carpathian Mountains too, and could be Slavs. Tacitus has also recorded the existence of the tribe of Lugim, Lugians. This name may refer to the people that spoke and speak today Sorbian or Lusatian languages, which, as well known, are also Slavic. The Soviet author Elena Chislavna Zgrzynskaya, in her Jordanes on the origin and deeds of the Gets from 1960, connects the Lugi to the Lusatian archaeological culture and agrees that they were Slavs. The historical region of Lusatia, called in Upper Sorbian Łužica and in Lower Sorbian Łužica, is located near the eastern border of Germany. Furthermore, as can be deduced from Tacitus's text, east of the Lugians, who are likely Slavs, dwelt the Gotons, maybe the Goths, maybe not, while in the 5th century of the Common Era, according to Eugipius, another author, the biographer of St. Severinus of Noricum, Severin is a Slavic name, the Goths, which as we recall were Slavs according to the priest of Dukla, resided in Lower Pannonia. Lower Pannonia was east of the Roman province of Noricum, and the Rugians, according to the same Eugipius, in the same 5th century, were situated near the Danube River and approximately, at least partly, in the north of today's Austria, near today's Czechia and Slovakia, and the Carpathian Mountains. We cannot simply call the Rugians a Germanic tribe for the following reason. The Roman geographer of the first half of the 1st century of the Common Era, Pomponius Mela, in his De Situ Orbis, places Sarmatia between the river Elbe, Albis, and the river Vistula, Visula. To put in detail, he first writes that the river Albis flows through non-Germanic peoples, and after that, he gives the following account. Above the river Elbe, Albis, lies the enormous Codanus Gulf, Codanus Sinus, thronged with big and small islands. Sarmatia, being wider inside than near the sea, being separated by the Vistula, Visula river from the lands that follow next, extends up to the Danube River, where Sarmatia itself goes to the rear. Below this text, Pomponius Mela mentions Sarmatian women whose description can relate to the Amazons, and separately mentions the Amazons that lived near the Caspian Sea and were called Sauromatids. We have said in the first video, which is dedicated to the Scythian language, that the Polish gentry derived themselves from the Sarmatians, and that the Sarmatians could be Slavs. And these Slavs, based on the words of Pomponius Mela, in the 1st century of the Common Era or before, inhabited even the northeastern part of today's Germany. We can also make an assumption that in the Sarmatia that Pomponius Mela describes in the piece just quoted, dwelt the Rugians. This assumption can be confirmed by a work written by Claudius Ptolemy, who was born in the 2nd century of the Common Era, after Pomponius Mela's death. To start, we will open the English wiki article about the Polish town of Darłowo. Some authors connect this town to the toponym Rugium, mentioned by Ptolemy in his Cosmographia, or Geography. I believe you still remember that the Russian word Rug and the Polish word Rug mean horn, because, as informed by Wiki, in the past, Darłowo was known as a fortress Dirlo or Dirlovo, and in 1270 was a part of the Danish Principality of Rügen, whose leader was Vislav or Vislav II. The name sounds like Slavic. In the Danish language, there is the word deer, corresponding to the English deer, when it comes to hunting, which denotes an animal having horns on its head. Its horns sometimes resemble branches of a tree. And the word law, meaning law, permission, or praise. Maybe, as a version, the meaning of the toponym's name, deer law, was sort of law of deers, rule of deers, or ruled by deers. This version, at least, suggests the etymological connection between the two names of the same location and may substantiate that the Rugians were Slavs. But let's look in much detail into the context in which the toponym called Rugium appears. We will open 4 editions of Ptolemy's Cosmographia. I will now list them as they are presented on the screen from the first at the top to the last 3 at the bottom from the left to the right. These editions are as follows. The one from 1401, 1457, the precise year is unknown, the one from 1466, 1500, the one from 1490, and the one from 1540. In some of these editions, we can find a mention of the tribe of Ruticlii. The word of a similar kind depends on the year of a published copy of Ptolemy's work. If you compare several random copies, in some of them you will see Rutidii in place of Ruticlii, in some Ruticlei, in some Rucidii, Rundii, Rutuclii, Rutigli, Rutuli, or even Runelia. The spelling of this appellation in the Greek editions of Ptolemy's Cosmographia also varies. In one of them from the late 15th century, it's written down as Rutiklioi. And I think this is the right one. It probably consists of the following parts: the ancient Greek rute, used for denoting plants called ru, and the ancient Greek kloios, meaning necklace or ornamental collar of gold. On the one hand, the whole word could have meant sort of bearing an ornamental necklace of Ru, or simply Ru-necked. On the other, in modern Greek, the word kloios, pronounced klios, is applied to an encircling object in general. If we imagine a Ru encircling someone's head instead of their neck, so that the Rutikloi will be Ru-headed people, we will find a possible explanation why some Slavs were believed to have red or reddish hair. Reddish hair can be linked with the Red Ru. According to a legend preserved by people living in or near the Carpathians, this Ru, as Ukrainian wiki reads, being almost all day long of the yellow color, becomes red at Etvana Kupala night. If a young woman finds a red Ru, she'll be happy in love. In the Ukrainian culture at least, in the rite of getting married, young women put a garland of flowers on their head, as described by the Polish ethnographer Henryk Bielaisen. In his book Weddings in the original Polish Wesele, the Poles and the Russians had a similar rite as well. According to this rite, after the garland was on the head of a young woman, it was sewn with Ru. The author doesn't specify whether this Ru was red. He only writes that the red color symbolized virginity in different cultures and describes where it was present in the wedding rites. According to him, during the wedding rite, as the Poles and the Russians believed, Mother of God twisted a garland of red roses for the bride and of sage for the bridegroom. In Slavic languages, the word Ru is translated as Ruta, which, as well as its Greek counterpart, likely shares the same root with the term Ruthenian, whereas Rutikloi could be just another name for the Ruthenians used by the Greeks for some period. Based on Ptolemy's Cosmographia, the Rutikloi dwelt between the river Viadus, which is the Oder River, and the river Vistula. The part Viad sounds like a phoneme combination inside the Polish term powiat, sort of a district, and I think it's one of the following two options. The first one suggests that the real word masked by this name is the Polish kwiat, meaning flower, and the name Oder, in turn, could possibly derive from the Latin odor, meaning smell, perfume, or stench. I believe everyone can easily intuitively connect flowers with smell, without any specific context. The second option for the Viadus is a Polish word derived from the Polish verb wiać, meaning to blow, for example, wiadzic or wiadek. The Oder River has a tributary today called Warta, flowing through the Polish city of Poznań, crucial in the history of Poland. Why am I speaking of this river? Poznań has almost the same longitude as Darłowo, and according to Ptolemy, the mouth of the river Viadus, today's Oder, has almost the same longitude as Rugium, today's Darłowo, which is impossible. It means that the river Viadus could be mistakenly applied to the river Warta, which, as imagined by Ptolemy or a predecessor of his, flowed only to the north. It was noted to make a connection to the following matter. The name Poznań is normally derived from the Polish Poznać, Poznacie, to get to know, but it seems that nobody can explain why it was called that. I think that the philosophy behind the name is what is kept in the name of the city of Kiev, but we will try to reach the answer gradually. First, I want you to pay attention to the latitude of the mouth of the Vistula River in Ptolemy's Cosmographia. It's 56 degrees. In the present-day coordinates, it's about 54 degrees, 21 minutes north. The difference between the Ptolemy and present-day latitude is about 1 degree 39 minutes, or approximately 1 2/3 degrees. Let's keep that in mind. Now we open another page in several editions of Ptolemy's work and find two toponyms, Sarum and Azagarium, which are located near the river Borysthenes, and as you can see on this slide, their coordinates depend on the edition. Sarum has the Ptolemy latitude of 54 degrees in some editions, 50 1/4 degrees in the second group of theirs, 50 1/6 in the third group, etc. But if we look at the toponym mentioned by the name of Azagarium, we will see in one place and at one instant several versions of the universe. That's the honest truth. Azagarium is a teleporting town which existed as a ghost at one and the same time at the latitude of 50 2/3 degrees, 51 1/4 degrees, 51 1/6 degrees, and other degrees based on which universe the author of a particular edition came from. Moreover, every universe has its own Ptolemy, and every Ptolemy has his own Cosmographia. We finally understood what's happened. In other editions, the situation is even worse. You can find 61 degrees, 41 degrees, and so on for Azagarium. That's how European authors worked with the primary sources. In the case of Sarum, I think in the original text its real latitude by Ptolemy was 50 1/4 degrees, and in the case of Azagarium, Azagarium's latitude might have been between 52 1/6 degrees and 52 1/3 degrees. It's of course a guess, based on the disfigurement pattern that can be observed in the numbers in question and on the belief of some scholars that Azagarium is a predecessor of Kiev. One of them is the Soviet and Ukrainian architect and architectural historian Boris Yerofalov, who wrote the book Roman Kiev or Castrum Azagarium at Kiev Podil. At the moment, I think this hypothesis is right. Once we deduct 1 2/3 degrees in the last case, we will get the latitude between 50 1/2 degrees and 50 2/3 degrees. The latter corresponds to the same Ptolemy latitude in some of the editions, and the former is the latitude of today's Kiev, which is 50 degrees 27 minutes north in the present-day coordinates. Ptolemy has also mentioned the toponym called Metropolis. The ancient Greek metropolis means mother city or capital city. The coordinates of Metropolis, applying the same formula, correspond to the island of Small Khortytsia, known as the island of Baida. 49 1/2 degrees minus 1 2/3 degrees is equal to 47 5/6 degrees. Everything is correct. The latitude of the island is 47 degrees 49 minutes north. Alternatively, it could be the island of Khortytsia proper. The Ukrainian word Khortytsia means female greyhound. Please keep this word in mind too, because it relates to the Scythians. In my first video, I spoke of the Ukrainian roots har and hor relating to fire or flame, and I considered an option that the word Amazon could refer to the Polish małżonka, meaning wife. It's of course a hypothesis, but the main point is that in some of the Scythian words, to restore the original ones, the first alpha in the ancient Greek representation should be removed. In a separate video, we will see another Scythian word this rule may refer to. Now, having removed the first letter from Azagarium, we can compare the resulting word Zagarium to the Ukrainian Zagoryatysya, Zagorytysya, to begin to burn or to blaze. The roots har and hor are considered to be interchangeable without loss of their initial sense. A town or city can bloom like a flower or shine like a star. One of these two senses could be kept in this name. It would sound in Ukrainian as Zaharets. On the other hand, Azagarium, written down in ancient Greek as Azagarion, can just be the composition of the ancient Greek adjective azygos, unpaired or unwedded, and diminutive suffix arion. Azygarion can denote a small town of unmarried people. The Greek version may pretty well fit several appellations of one place related to the city of Kiev. Constantine Porphyrogenitus, in his De Administrando Imperio, mentions a castle, stronghold, or fortress called Kioava, whose one more name was Samvatas. In the rest of his passages, Constantine Porphyrogenitus writes the first name in the form of Kiova and Kijavon. On the one hand, these three names resemble the Polish Kijova, the genitive of the Polish name of Kiev, Kijów. On the other hand, the Greek Omicron Alpha, or the Latin OA, exists at least in the Wendish language, but is not characteristic of Polish. For example, the English water is translated into the Polish voda, but into the Wendish voada. Oa is also present in the name of the Ruthenian king Odoacer, and another Oa is present in the Buila inscription, which for no adequate reason is believed to be written in a Turkic language. In my view, it's a Slavic inscription, which I will later provide my analysis on, but not in this video. I think this Oa is pronounced as the Polish O or simply O. The name of Odoacer could be read in the original language somewhat as Wodonkier, corresponding to the Polish kierujący wodą, the one who drives waters. We will be considering this version as a first approximation of the possible answer. Such a name characterizes its holder as the sea god Poseidon, and among Slavic leaders there were several ones whose names are in some way connected to water. For example, a Hunnic leader's name Attila might refer, though not necessarily, to the Ukrainian Hatila, alternatively Hatilo. The last version already exists in the collective consciousness of some Ukrainians. As Hatila is a person and not an inanimate object, if this name is really Ukrainian, I think the ending should be Illa, assuming that this was the rule for such appellations in the past. But today, this rule does not work. The name can be derived from the Ukrainian verb ghatite, which is translated, depending on the context, either as to build a dike or to strike with force. Did he bear the Ukrainian name or not? This precise sense, with higher confidence, is likely kept in the name of the river Atil, or properly Hatil, whose Hebrew spelling we will see in the Khazar correspondence. An alternative version for the name Attila is Hachila or Hachilo, from the Ukrainian verb hachiti, meaning to hook, and hachok, meaning hook. For now, we will not be favoring any version that at first glance seems to be possible. Moreover, that's not all of those I have. The leader of the Goths, recorded by Procopius of Caesarea, who doesn't mention any Ostrogoths, either in his history of the wars, or in secret history, or in the buildings, as well as Eugippius, who knew only about the Goths and no one else with a similar name, Totila also bore a Slavic name, which is Tochila. In the Ukrainian language, there is the verb tochiti, meaning to pour, to grind, to sharpen. Such names as Vodonkir, Hatila, Tochila connect the violence, the power, and the water. This is a linguistic connection which can be observed within the Slavic language family, and which will be deeper analyzed on this channel sometime later. The ending illa can be found in other Slavic names belonging to some of the historical leaders, though they don't always relate to the water. One of the leaders of the gods, according to Jordanes, bore the name of Gudila and had a daughter called Medopa. Gudila is just a Ukrainian or a Slavic name Gudila, sharing the same root with the verb gudite, translated as to buzz, to hoot. Medopa is likely the result of respelling the Latin Medopa with ha, and or the Greek Medofa. The Latin digraph ph traditionally corresponded to the Greek phi. Medofa is a Slavic name as well. To make the reverse transliteration, we are allowed to associate the letter phi with a phoneme resembling v. The Ukrainian feminine adjective medova and the masculine medovy literally means honeyed. We can compare it to the English form of address honey, used in regard to a person we love. But as a Slavic name, it can be also connected to the history of the Huns, who, as well known, treated their guests to honey when the latter arrived. Of course, the fact itself that the Gothic elite could bear the Slavic names doesn't mean that the gods were Slavs, but the place where the gods were situated from the 1st century of the Common Era to the 5th century of the Common Era doesn't give much chance to the Germanic version of their origin. But let's get back to the text of Constantine Porphyrogenitus. If the Kiyava is Wendish, we can try to find another word that probably shares the same root with this name in the French language dictionary of Jan Potocki, and we will find it. This word is kiyot, meaning flower. The Ukrainian analog is kvit. These words are usually considered as those having one root and no suffixes, but from the historical point of view, this it, ot in the past was likely just a suffix. Such an idea normally crosses one's mind after looking at longer words. The Ukrainian drimota, doze, nudota, nausea, hotite, to want, letite, to fly, etc. The Ukrainian root kv and the Wendish root ki can mean not just flower, but also to bloom, and in this case, maybe, we should perceive this root as something denoting an action instead of an object. In the Wendish language, there is the adjective forming ending ova, iva, and the noun forming ending ava. Kiyuava could mean, in Wendish, recalling that ki can denote an action instead of an object, bloom in place. The word samvatas, if we pay attention to the letter tau, may be the Ukrainian sambach. If shembor is derived from the Polish bożycie, sambach is likely derived from the Ukrainian bachitisia, to see each other, and can be connected to the Ukrainian pobaczenie, date. Alternatively, it could be derived from the Russian bachitisia, to like, to be charming. When we are speaking of a date, we quite often imply a romantic meeting between a man and a woman. In the Ukrainian culture at least, when a child was born in a family, the parents planted a tree. It actually supports the expected view on what the ancient towns looked like. The English town is believed to come from the Old English tun, meaning garden. The French ville, meaning town or city, is believed to come from the Latin villa, meaning country house or farm. The Serbo-Croatian grad, the Bulgarian grad, the Macedonian grad means city or town, while the Ukrainian gorod means a vegetable garden. The English fruit garden will be translated into the Ukrainian sad, and the Ukrainian sadiba, mesuage, in turn, is derived from this word and the verb sadite, to plant. It means that archaeology will not always have the capacity to trace the archaeological evidence of some of the cities, which are called cities today, because what is called today a city was a town. What is called today a town was a village. What became a village was grown from a tree. The sense of the term town changed through centuries, so we cannot easily apply this term to the past. It's a problem of the uneven use of the terminology by historians, archaeologists, and other scientists. They don't always separate what is meant by the ancient town from what is meant by the modern town. Although Constantine Porphyrogenitus speaks of a fortress, the history of its name and or cognomen could be older. On the other hand, the fortress could receive the name Sambach if it was a lighthouse for ships, but this version means that the name Kyiv could be interpreted by its name givers as fire resembling in a flame flower, observed by river travelers looking at it from afar. And in this context, Azagarion could refer to the assumed Slavic name Zaharetz, though not necessarily. If Azagarion just referred to the Roman military camp localized by Boris Yerofalov, its name could simply mean that the camp consisted of unmarried soldiers. But what about the legendary Ki, which I've mentioned in my first video? Let's again consider the idea of a man and a woman's date. If Ki was real, he could be a son of a progenitor of some Slavic dynasty. After he was born, his parents could plant a tree or a flower. New dynasties traditionally began with a new marriage. Ki's name, if he existed, could be Wendish, but that's only one version. The name of Kyiv recorded in the so-called Kievan letter corresponds either to the Wendish name Kijoava, Kijova, Kijova, or the Polish Kyjów, in which it's spelled with the following Hebrew letters Kof, Yod, Yod, Vav, Bet, which may confirm that Constantine Porphyrogenitus didn't write anything much different or anything much new. Now I'd like you to pay attention to several names in Constantine Porphyrogenitus's De Administrando Imperio. The simplest one is Mlynitska. It's just a Greek spelling of the Ukrainian name Mlynitska or Mlynitsk, after adaptation of this word to modern Ukrainian, of course. It's an adjective formed from the noun mlyn, meaning mill. The toponyms with the name being even closer to Constantine Porphyrogenitus's spelling are located in the southwest of Ukraine and in Poland. I will list several villages only. Mlynitska in Lviv Oblast, Mlynitska in Ternopil Oblast, Muyniska in Lublin Voivodeship, Muyniska in Wielkopolska Voivodeship, and Muyniska in West Pomeranian Voivodeship. The author speaks of Mlynitska or Mlynsk as about a castle or a stronghold, but where it's situated is hard to say right now. The presence of the Greek iota between mu and lambda can be easily explained. When an original word starts with a consonant cluster, that is with several consonants in a row, this cluster is not always properly represented in a foreign language. In order to represent such a word, the foreign author will add a vowel, either before this cluster or within it. Some Slavic words start with several consonants without any vowel in between, especially in the South Slavic languages, but this feature is narrow in the Greek language. The choice of the vowel depends on the circumstances. These circumstances can be the vowel in the next syllable, which restricts this choice. In order to not much damage the perception of the original word, the first vowel should be chosen in the way that it will become assimilated to the second vowel. That's what happened to the word Mlynitska. Another name, Chernigoga, is likely the city of Chernihiv. In my first video, I've said that the name is derived from the Ukrainian Zernihiv, which describes the city as a land of grain. But I have not noticed that along with the word zerno in the Ukrainian language, there is also the word zerno, meaning the same, grain. Chernigoga can refer to the Ukrainian name Zernigosh or Zernigosh. That's why it's written with tau zeta at the beginning. As for the phoneme zh, in the Greek alphabet, it can be represented at least either with the letter gamma or with the letter zeta. This idea can naturally occur to one if one notices the transition between the phonemes g, zh, and z, which exists in and between various European languages. Now, assuming that the fricative h or the approximant h can be confused with the approximant v, Chernigoga could be also the genitive of Zernihiv, Zernigiv, which is Zernigova, Zernigova. The so-called Vusegrade is usually associated with today's Vyshgorod, but its historical name could be completely different. Its spelling, led by Constantine Porphyrogenitus, makes me think that the word consists of two parts. The first part may refer to the Ukrainian verb vuzete, to narrow, or the Ukrainian adjective vuzkei, narrow, but the second part to the Ukrainian noun gryada or gryada. The first one, gryada, has several senses. One of them is small island lying in a reed bed. Another is a place where a river runs through its narrow stream bed and its waves jump up and lap. The full Ukrainian name of this toponym could be Vuzegryad, derived from Vuzka Gryada, meaning place located near or around a narrow stream of a river, or narrow small island lying in a reed bed. But if the second part refers to the word Gryada, whose sense is ridge, the toponym's name could mean place on a narrowing ridge, but I doubt that either of these options is valid. Another idea is that Vuzegryad, the full name can be the same, or alternatively Vozegryad, can consist of the Ukrainian viz or Russian vuz, meaning cart or wagon. The root viz vuz can transform into voz in longer words, and the Ukrainian ryasty, meaning to quickly and noisily run or drive. If some important routes, say trade routes, crossed this place, the place could bear the name Vuzegryad or Vozegryad, denoting an area of wagons quickly and noisily passing through it. As for the Vyshegorod or Vishnigorod mentioned in the primary chronicle, this place may have nothing to do with today's Vyshgorod or Constantine Porphyrogenitus's Vusegrade. Teliutse could be a transcription of the Ukrainian Telyovtsi or Tlyovtsi. In the first case, the name will be related to the calf, because telya means calf. In the second case, to the verb tlite, to eat ravenously. Another version is that the original name was Telihovtsi, derived from teliha, wagon, but it seems doubtful to me. What can be said for sure is that the name is clearly Slavic and most likely Ukrainian or Russian. What should be added is that Telyovtsi also resembles the name of the village of Chelovce in Slovakia. And finally, Nemogarda or Nemogardas in Greek. It's believed by some people that Nemogarda or Nemogard is Novgorod, meaning new town or new city. This version is pretty funny, but I suggest you to stop laughing for a while. You will have time to do it after watching the video. To speak seriously, this version was likely invented by the Russian scholars, which are hard to call scholars, except maybe a few of them. Nemogard can consist of two parts, that's true, but the first part, Nemo, can be connected to the Ukrainian Nemola, meaning silt. The ending la can disappear in compound words. But Gard, no, it's not city or town. The Ukrainian noun Gard or Gard means series of buffers or fences for fishing, or buffer of stones across a river, and the verb gardovati means, as well as gatiti, to build a dike. These two words are what can form the composition Nemogarda, Nemogard, but in the Ukrainian language it could sound as one of these: Nemogard, Nemogardia, Nemogardits, Nemogard, Nemogardia, Nemogardits, whose sense is barrier built against silt. That is, these places could be an obstacle for silt and be located on a river. Although we are unsure about the location of these toponyms mentioned by Constantine Porphyrogenitus in this passage, they seem to pretend to be not much far from the river Dnipro and or its tributaries. Constantine Porphyrogenitus has also recorded other interesting names, such as those of the Dnipro river's rapids given or used by the Russes. We'll analyze them in another video, but I can say in advance that the Normanists will be disappointed. These names are Slavic. The Dnipro River was previously known by the name of Borysthenes. I think now it's time to answer what this name means. Some of you will be surprised, but this name is Scythian. What do we know about this river? According to Constantine Porphyrogenitus, the Russes traveled along the Dnipro on their monoxylons, and that's actually the key to decipher the meaning of this appellation. What is usually meant by a monoxylon today is a boat made from a single trunk. In some another video I will probably mention one tree which was called Scythian in the distant past. It's not about boats, but rather an interesting thing to tell. In ancient Greek, the name of the river is written as Voreustenes, the ancient Greek beta or Greek vita being its first letter. Voreustenes corresponds to the Ukrainian Vorysteny or Vorystenets, alternatively Horysteny or Horystenets. Moses Khorenatsi has also recorded this name, but in regard to a Hunnic city, and in the form of Varachan. A similar name can also be found in other historical sources. This city was probably situated somewhere near the Dnipro River. We will distinctly see that at some point, but not in this episode. The first part of Vorysteny or Vorystenets refers to the Ukrainian or Russian noun Vorina, the root being vor, meaning pole, rod, rail or perch, and refers to the collective singular noun Voria, Viria, which can be interpreted as the plural form of Vorina. In modern Ukrainian, Voria, Viria means reed fence, but I would pay greater attention only to the fact of the collectivity, plurality. The second part refers to the verb stenate, to groan weeping, as reported by Academic Explanatory Dictionary of the Ukrainian Language from 1970-1980. Vorina can be understood as small boat or raft. A raft resembles a fence made from rods floating on the water, and stenate as to cry. So we get the compound of these two words depicting the river as the one crying rafts, the one crying monoxylons. In the case of Horysteny or Horystenets, the first part can refer to the Ukrainian gore, sorrow, and the whole appellation can mean the one crying sorrow. It's clearly a Ukrainian or maybe Russian name, though the senses of its parts possibly are partly lost in time, but its construction is almost undoubtedly obvious. It consists of two Ukrainian or Russian parts. For the Muscovites it means really bad news, because the linguistic analysis of the toponyms of Rus, or to put simply, those on the territory of Ukraine, are not Russian at all. No toponym, no name is connected to the Russian language, because the Russian language didn't exist yet, but it should have been clear to everybody even without this analysis. The idea that Muscovy has anything to do with Rus is just an unhealthy desire of some people incapable of critically thinking. But now I will explain why the Muscovites are in deep trouble. That the name of Sviatoslav I of Kiev was written in Greek letters as Sfendoslavos by Leo the Diacon and Svendoslavos by Constantine Porphyrogenitus reflects the fact that he could bear either the Old Church Slavonic name Sviatoslav or the Polish name Świętosław. The Muscovites are in the awkward position now. They have to explain, at least to themselves, why they still hesitate to tell the world that the Russian language branched off from Polish, though no Russian native speaker was born yet, or why they are ashamed of their Polish roots, which they don't have. I'm currently speaking of those Muscovites who believe that the European maps, on which the land called Muscovy is depicted, were invented by the Poles. But it was just the beginning. We will reveal now how low the level of the Russian historiography is. According to Constantine Porphyrogenitus, the father of Svetoslav was Ingor, whose name is spelled with a double gamma and with an omega. The author of the Historia Rusi YouTube channel proposed to compare the name Igor with the Wendish word Yagar, meaning hunter, to discover the meaning for the former. But, in my current view, we should reconsider this version. The letter combination Ingor can be found in such a Wendish word as Springor, meaning grasshopper. The literal translation in English would be Springer, in Ukrainian Stribun or Prigun. Springor is not Ingor, but Ingor as a letter combination can be the last part of some of the Wendish words, which is a crucial thing here. If the name Ingor is Wendish, it likely has the root ing and the suffix or. A similar word, but with a different suffix, can be seen in the name of one of the tributaries of the Bug River. This tributary is called Inghul. In the French Wendish dictionary of Jan Potocki, we can find the word Inglik, which means angel, in translation into Ukrainian Yanghul. And we can say almost for sure that the name of the river Inghul means angel as well. The name of the river Bug, according to one of the existing hypotheses, means God. The word God is translated into the Ukrainian Bog, the Polish Bug, and the Russian Bog or Bug. So this hypothesis seems to be valid. An angel is a helper of God. A tributary like fills up the main river with water, helping it in flowing. On the other hand, an angel is an intermediary between people and God. On a map of Ibn Haukal, which we will see a bit later, some river, which can be the river Inghul, connects the Bug with the Dnipro. The Dnipro River also has a tributary of a similar appellation, Inghulets, which, along with the Inghul River, could be believed to be an intermediary between the Dnipro and the Bug. Here I think we should notice an interesting account given by Herodotus in two his passages. Now the Scythians say that their nation is the youngest of all nations, and that this came to pass as follows. The first man who ever existed in this region, which then was desert, was one named Targitaus. And of these Targitaus they say, though I do not believe it for my part, however, they say, the parents were Zeus and the daughter of the river Borysthenes. The third river is the Upanis, which starts from Scythia and flows from a great lake, round which feed white wild horses. And this lake is rightly called Mother of Upanis. From this, then, the river Upanis takes its rise, and for a distance of 5 days' sail, it flows shallow and with sweet water still. But from this point on towards the sea, for 4 days' sail, it is very bitter, for there flows into it the water of a bitter spring, which is so exceedingly bitter that, small as it is, it changes the water of the Upanis by mingling with it, though that is a river to which few are equal in greatness. This spring is on the border between the lands of the agricultural Scythians and of the Alazonians, and the name of the spring and of the place from which it flows is in Scythian Exampaios, and in the Hellenic tongue Hierai Hodoi. Now the Turas and the Upanis approach one another in their windings in the land of the Alazonians, but after this each turns off and widens the space between them as they flow. Hierai Hodoi means holy ways. According to the historian Volodymyr Ivanovich Petruk, Exampaios is the river Mertvovod. Mertvovoda means dead water, which is a tributary of the Bug lying northwards after the Inghul. He wrote about it in his dissertation Scythian Sacred Center Exampaios in the context of the cultural heritage of Ukraine, in the original Ukrainian Скіфський сакральний центр Екзампей в контексті культурної спадщини України. Some scholars suggest that the Mertvovod was a river where dead Scythian kings were floated downstream by others so that the dead followed their eternal path and or got the eternal rest. It will be our key to properly interpret what Exampaios means. To understand the sense of this Scythian word, this word is Scythian according to Herodotus, not according to us, we need to find out how to properly pronounce the ancient Greek xi. Today it's assumed that its pronunciation simply was x, but we can safely suppose that this letter could be used to write down the phonemes x, ksh, ksh. On the one hand, for the phonemic proximity. On the other, for the fact that there is no separate letter for the phoneme sh in the Greek alphabet, but the list of the presumptive phonemes the xi may correspond to can be extended, and we will now try to discover them by making up a chain of pairs of transitions between phonemes that can be confused by a listener whose language is poor in hashing sibilants. I will list only the voiceless pairs because given them, the voiced pairs can be reconstructed quite simply. So, starting from the very beginning, here they are. X, 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 x. Another approach we can involve in the analysis is a search for transitions between related words from different languages, so that in one of them there is the Greek xi or the Latin x. For example, the English six, the Polish sześć, the Ukrainian sześć, all meaning six, likely share the same root. The cluster x in the first language corresponds to the cluster sh in the second and to the st in the third. The Ukrainian cluster st quite often accords with the Polish sh in such pairs. Another example is the Latin crux and the Bulgarian krst, both connected to a cross. Similar thoughts can cross our mind if we look at another Greek letter, psi. The Greek prefix pseudo, denoting something similar to or resembling a thing named in the suffix part, is likely cognate with the Bulgarian počti, which means almost. The consonants p, s, d in the Greek prefix correlate with p, ch, t in the Bulgarian adverb. Moreover, either the Greek xi or psi could serve as a prototype for the glagolitic shta and or the Cyrillic shcha, which finally makes our hypothesis closer to a scientific theory. Let's look at the word exampaios again. If we ask ourselves what this word looks like, some of us will be able to recall two Latin words, tempus meaning time and templum meaning shrine. They seem to be connected, and they most probably are connected indeed. But why am I talking about that? Because it's a second key to decipher the word exampaios. Having imagined that the letter xi in the name of this sacred place is pronounced kch or ch, having added a fricative or an approximant at the beginning, say the Ukrainian v, and having removed the ending os, we will get somewhat of vekchampai, vekchambai, vechchampai, or vechchambai. The words connected to the eternity that can be found in Slavic languages exist in the following forms, as the Ukrainian or Russian vik and the Polish wiek, age, the Ukrainian wieczność, the Russian wieczność, and the Polish wieczność, eternity proper. I can, of course, add that there is an alternation between e and e that happens in some Ukrainian words, in some circumstances, but that's not the main point right now. The second part, champai or chambai, is very interesting. Its form suggests that it should be a verb in the imperative. Its infinitive would be sort of champati or chambati. Here I should add a remark. The Greek milpi in Greek can be pronounced b, but if the original word had the cluster mp or mb, Herodotus wouldn't have a choice but to spell the word with milpi. The Greeks called exampaios holy ways. If vek or vech is about time and sacrality, then champai should be about ways or paths. Among the words in non-Slavic languages, we can notice the French jambe, which means leg. But in the Ukrainian language, the closest words are chapati, meaning to walk slowly, and chobit, meaning high boot. Today, the phoneme combinations amp and amb are generally not present in the Ukrainian words in common usage. The closest analog can rather be found in the Polish language in the form of the Polish letter O, being written as the Latin A with a diacritic sign called ogonek, in such a word as dąb, which means oak, and whose Ukrainian counterpart is dub. It means that either the Scythian language had some features of other Slavic languages, besides those of Ukrainian, and we will see several of them in a few minutes, or Herodotus, by the Scythian language, meant several Slavic languages. But what we can say almost for sure is that this vekchampai, vekchambai, vechchampai, or vechchambai is a Slavic name, meaning walking slowly eternally, or walk slowly eternally in the imperative. We have finally found the eternal path we were so much looking for. I know that we should return to Ingur, but we should decipher several other Scythian words with the letter xi, finish with these two fragments, and do one more thing. The river Eupanis is the river Buga. This Scythian name is very simple. It resembles the Ukrainian or Russian Hubany or Hubany. Huba means lip. Maybe the name was connected to some sacred rite of kissing either the water or the Scythian kings floating past or floated down the river. Which option, if any, is right is not clear. But Herodotus described the taste of the Buv in its different sections, which cannot go unnoticed, along with the fact that the place where the rivers Mertvovod, Inhul and Buv flow, based on their names and description, was possibly sacred for the Syrians for a long time, though the sacred rites could depend on the time period, and some of these names appeared later than the 5th century before the Common Era. As I have previously mentioned the river Turas, or to be precise, Tures, I will provide the sense of this name as well. In the Ukrainian language, there are the following words: dzuriti, zuriti, tsuriti, churiti, churkati. They mean to flow, to trickle, to gush. There is the Ukrainian word churok, which means torrent or cascade. In the Russian language, there are words churiti, to ooze, and churek, trickle or jet. The original name of the Turas in the Ukrainian manner could be Churets. The Dniester River, which is the Turas, does have some cascades, such as Divochi Slyozy, or Maiden's Tears in English, in Dniester Canyon. But whether the river received its name because of cascades is hard to say right now. What is undoubted is that the name refers to the flow and itself is Slavic, Ukrainian or Russian most likely. According to Herodotus, the Greeks or the Hellenes living near the mouth of the Turas are called Turitai. It's just the Ukrainian or Russian name Churichi, the proper noun being in the plural. The Ukrainian or Russian suffix ich is represented by the ancient Greek iota-tau. Everything is right. Ammianus Marcellinus mentioned the river Danastius, which is considered to be the river Dniester and or the river Turas. To be accurate, by the Danastius, he meant some river between the Istros, which is the present-day Danube, and the Borysthenes, which is the present-day Dnipro. At the same time, Jordanes mentions the river Danaster as a river separate from the Turas, and the Danube at the same time as the farthest channel of the Istros. Constantine Porphyrogenetus, even worse, wrote that the Danapris and the Danastris are the two greatest rivers between the river Danube and the city of Sarkel, whose correct name is Sadivil, as we know, which suggests that today's Dniester cannot be Danaster, but the river Bug can. On the other hand, the river Bogum is mentioned by Constantine Porphyrogenetus separately too, but he doesn't highlight it in any special way, he just enumerates it. The word Danastius, oddly, resembles the ancient Greek Dynastes, which means lord or ruler, or is an epithet of Zeus or Poseidon. The modern Greek Dynasteia, derived from the ancient Greek Dynasteia, means dynasty. The replacement of the Greek upsilon with the Latin a is what we suspected in the case of the toponym Azagarium. In my view, the ancient Greek term Dynasteia can be connected to a number in Slavic languages. An example is the Slovak dvanast, meaning 12. How did this idea even occur to me? The patriarch of the Israelites, Jacob, had 12 sons, one of which was named Dan. At the same time, Dan, in the Aeolic dialect of ancient Greek, is a form of the name of Zeus. In the ancient Greek language, we can also find such words as Aster, meaning star, and Aphros, meaning foam or froth. Danaster may consist of the ancient Greek Dan and Aster, and mean Zeus's star or Zeus's stars. Danapris, or maybe Danapros, is probably derived from a respelled ancient Greek name that consists of Dan and Aphros, which, compounded in one word, means Zeus's foam. In the Greek mythology, Aphrodite Urania emerged from the sea foam, as written on Wiki, and as we remember, was born from Uranus's genitals. And as for Zeus, another epithet of his was Zeus Lucaius, which means wolf Zeus. Just recall for a while the island of Small Hortitia. Furthermore, by Achaios of Eretria, as Wiki continues, Zeus was called starry-eyed. The river Danastius, as well as the river Danaster, was probably today's river Bug. But even if we assume that the present-day Dniester is the historical Danastius and the historical Danaster, regardless of whether it's true or not, we now better understand the words of Herodotus, who said that Argitaus's parents were Zeus and the daughter of the river Borysthenes. Herodotus, firstly, has indicated the lands of Great Scythia limited by the Danaster and the Danapris. We can recall the Ukrainian anthem in which Scythia was from the Sian to the Don. The Ukrainian word syate means to shine. As an alternative version, the river Sian is what could be the Danaster, based only on its name. From the historical perspective, the Scythians from Little or Lesser Scythia that inhabited the territory of Great Scythia, formerly being a desert, were a new generation. Just as children are younger than their parents, so Great Scythia is younger than Lesser Scythia. That's why Herodotus writes about the desert and the Scythians being the youngest of all nations. He didn't write about all the Scythians in this passage, but only of those who resided on the lands from the Danaster to the Danapris. Targitaus is likely a Ukrainian name which is related to the verb targotite, the root being targ, meaning to prattle, to chatter. In the original language, Targitaus would be probably Targicha. The approximate meaning of this name is the one who speaks, which confirms that he, Targicha, first of all, was a Slav. This name is an example in which we can see a clear vowel alternation between E and O, or between E and O, being a peculiarity of the Ukrainian language. In the Russian language, the analogical alternation happens between U and O. The fragment about the origin of Targicha's parents can be reread in one more way. The daughter of the river Borysthenes could be Foam, and the Foam refers us to Aphrodite Urania. Aphrodite Urania could be the mother of Targicha, his father supposedly being Zeus. Both Zeus and Aphrodite Urania were sky gods. that may explain why the Scythians called themselves Sokolati, young falcons, because possibly they were born, according to them, by the skies. That could be a reason why they spoke of themselves as about the birds. But what else does the fact that Aphrodite Urania emerged from the sea foam tell us? The answer lies in the connection of the foam with the genitals of Uranus. The foam is sperm or semen. The river Borysthenes could relate to the genitals, but not of Uranus, of Zeus. The river Danaster was the eyes of Zeus. And if the river Danaster is today's Dniester, the river Hubань was the lips of Zeus, and the river Tanais, logically, was the legs or feet of Zeus. Herodotus' account about Scythia may suggest that the territory, roughly speaking, from the Carpathian Mountains to the Caucasus Mountains was the body of Zeus. But that's not the only thing he writes of. He also provides us with the account of the origin of the Scythians given by the Hellenes who dwelt about the Pontus. Heracles came to the land now called Scythia, and as a storm came upon him together with icy cold, he drew over him his lion's skin and went to sleep. Meanwhile, the mares harnessed in his chariot disappeared by a miraculous chance as they were feeding. Then, when Heracles woke, he sought for them, and having gone over the whole land, at last he came to the region which is called Eulalia, and there he found in a cave a kind of twofold creature formed by the union of a maiden and a serpent, whose upper parts from the buttocks upwards were those of a woman, but her lower parts were those of a snake. Afterwards, Herodotus will say that this woman would have 3 sons by Heracles, the youngest of which would be called Skytes, or likely Skytes in Ukrainian, the name meaning the one who chatters or simply the one who speaks, and being derived from the Ukrainian noun sokit, chattering, and the verb sokotati sokotite, to chatter. The creature that is half a woman and half a serpent points to a rusalka, a female entity in Slavic folklore having a fish tail instead of legs. To put simply, a mermaid. As a mermaid, this woman could be the daughter of the river Borysthenes, and the river Borysthenes, as the mother of this mermaid, could be a siren. The sirens are mythical creatures that use their alluring voices to make nearby sailors wreck their ships. According to English Wikipedia, in early Greek art, they were represented as birds with large women's heads, bird feathers, and scaly feet. Then, as the article reads, at some point, they began to be imagined as having fish tails instead of legs. As we remember, the Scythian counterpart of Aphrodite Urania is Argibasa, the goddess of voice and hearing. As a Scythian sky god, Argibasa could be a siren believed to be half a woman and half a bird. Her tears could be the river Borysthenes, and in these tears, her mermaid daughter was probably born. The Hellenes could remember the legend of the Scythians' origin more precisely than the Scythians living in Great Scythia. But both the Scythian and the Hellenic legend tell the same story. Heracles, as well known, was a son of Zeus. To be a grandson of Zeus's is the same as to be a son of his, because a son of a son is also a son. The Scythians are sons of Tarhicha and or Skytes. Whether it's one and the same person is not clear, though it's possible. Tarkotate is a synonym of Sokotate Sokotite. Skytes is a son of Heracles, of a son of Zeus, and Skytes is a son of a mermaid, of a daughter of the siren Argibasa. The Hellenes' belief that Skytes was a son of a mermaid is reflected in the image of Epictetus from the 6th century before the Common Era that we saw in the very first video, in which a Scythian archer is depicted in a fish suit. The name Eulalia was likely the Syrian Hulyaya. The corresponding Ukrainian verb is hulyate, to walk. I don't think that this word comes from the ancient Greek Eulaios, meaning belonging to the forest, as it doesn't match the context. In this video, I will only say that the region of Hulyaya, where Heracles came to, was probably located on the Crimean Peninsula. There are at least 2 reasons for this region to have such a name. Either it was a walking place for Heracles and his partner, or was a walking place for the cattle to feed. In another video, we will give the second version a closer look. According to Sergei Mikhailovich Solovyov, as some of you may already know or may remember, the Russes lived on the island Vamia. Why this island can be the Crimean Peninsula will be shown another time as well, but there is an interesting thing in this regard that I will share right now. One could have thought that the English word wave connects 2 unrelated senses. One is about water and the other is about someone moving their hand. But a link between them does exist. It can be imagined as a mermaid standing amid water waves and waving her hand, or as a wave being a mermaid's hand touching a male person. For this reason, the English wave can be cognate with the Ukrainian verb vabiti, to lure. In other words, the root vav in wave may correspond to the root vab in vabiti. Let's now check that the rule about the letter C really works before we get back to the Knyaz Ingor. Herodotus reports that Targitaus had 3 sons, Lipoxais, Arpoxais, and Colaxais. Colaxais was the youngest son. Then he adds, in the reign of these, there came down from heaven certain things, wrought of gold, a plough, a yoke, a battle axe, and a cup, and fell in the Syrian land. When the eldest sons, Lipoxais and Arpoxais, approached these things, the gold blazed with fire. Colaxais was the only person who could take these things. When he approached them, the flame was quenched. The elder brothers then, acknowledging the significance of this thing, delivered the whole of the kingly power to the youngest. The idea behind this story is that the youngest will not use these things to kill somebody or to destroy something, because as well known, children are innocent. Here we should also recall that the Hellenes derived the Syrians from the youngest son of Heracles. This fact can be connected to a tradition that existed in the Common Era in Europe, called appanage. What should be additionally noted here is that the axe is usually associated with the Proto-Indo-Europeans, or just early Indo-Europeans, and is considered by some scholars to be one of their main tools or weapons, as Colaxais likely was allowed to use these things from heaven as tools and not weapons, and because of the plough and the yoke among them, his name could relate to agriculture. That means that Colaxais can be the Ukrainian Kolachich, alternatively Kolashch or Kolashcha. Although the Greek C by default is a consonant cluster, a short sound like E between the inner consonants is also expected. The noun kolach has no exact translation. In English, it's also called kolach. Broadly speaking, it's bread. Going into some details, it's a type of pastry. What is noteworthy is that the term appanage is considered to derive from the reconstructed Latin appanare, meaning to give bread. No extra word is necessary, I believe, at this stage. Except one. The appellation kolachich has the noun forming suffix ich, which usually denotes affiliation to a family, kin, clan, gens, profession, occupation, etc. The present-day analog is the surname, or the fact of descendancy from the quote-unquote father to the quote-unquote son, as in the present-day patronymics. To put simply, Kolachich can literally mean the son of Kolach. It suggests that the original name of the youngest son of Targhicha could be Kolachik, but his successors, in other words, quote-unquote sons, could bear the name of Kolachichi, Kolachichis. As for Lipoxais, we know that the Syrians descended from him were called Auhatai. To discover what these two words mean, we can try to guess if these two names are related etymologically. If we look at the problem from this angle, in order for these two words to be related, we need to recall the case of the tribe of Arimaspoi, in which we had to replace the capital Alpha with the capital Delta. And if we do this replacement in Auhatai and get Duhatai instead, we'll be able to see, again, two Ukrainian words, Lipochich, alternatively Lipochch or Lipochcha, and Duhachi. The singular will be Duhach. Lipok is a plant that is called Galium odoratum in Latin. The Latin odor means smell. In English, the plant is called sweet-scented bedstraw. The main thing about this plant is its fragrance, and that's the key. The Ukrainian noun duch means spirit, breath, smell, odor, or fragrance. The adjective duchmyany means fragrant or sweet-scented. Apparently, we have properly deciphered these two words. Both Lipochich and Duhachi relate to the smell. As an extra, but still important note, the Ukrainian noun dusha means soul. When a person dies, the soul leaves their body, and when the person is dead, their body smells bad. I'm currently expressing my thought that the words duch, duchmyany, dusha share the same root, duch, dush, dus. At least in some of the Slavic languages, the phonemes h, sh, sh, s can alternate. The last word is arpoxais. You'll be surprised, but here we should replace alpha with delta too. The result will be drpoxais. This word is an example of a feature that is mostly observed in South Slavic languages. The feature I'm talking about is the presence of words in their vocabularies that can start with a consonant cluster containing up to 5 consonants, if not more. But if we project this word onto the modern Ukrainian language axis, we'll have to add vowels like e, u, or something in between. Drpoxais corresponds to the Ukrainian dribochich, alternatively driboshch or driboshcha. The verb dribotate, dribotite, drobotite means to talk very fast, to chatter. The Syrian tribes that according to Herodotus are derived from the brother Dribochich are called Katiaroi and Traspias. As we are already sufficiently experienced people, these words should be easy for us. Katiaroi is either the Ukrainian kavchari, the singular is kavchar. The verb kavchati means to squeak, to scream, to whine, or the Ukrainian kachinyari or kachnyari. The singular is kachinyar or kachnyar, respectively. The collective noun kachnya means ducks. The second version better explains why this word was written down as katiaroi in ancient Greek. The phoneme combination nya pretty much resembles ya. As for the tribe of Traspians, its original name could be Cheriaspii. The singular is Cheriaspii. It consists of the noun cheria, meaning teal cheek, and the verb spivate, meaning to sing. Cheriaspii means singing teal cheeks or young teals that sing. Just look how the senses of these words are connected to that of the name Dribochich. Unbelievable. Moreover, these names provide a clear link between the speech and the birdsong which surmised in regard to the Syrian culture before. Though in these examples we observed only the missing vowels e and e, and in one case o, such vowels as o and likely u can also be missing in the Syrian words. That's what we actually already observed in such words as skolotoi, sokolati, and skutes, sokite, derived from socket. At the beginning, I thought it was a copyist mistake or conscious distortion, but now, in regard to the missing vowel, I think it could be a natural transformation within the Ukrainian language. The missing o, for example, can be found even in Polish. The Ukrainian doroga, which means road, corresponds to the Polish droga, the Ukrainian poriga, threshold, to the Polish prug, and so on. So we've at least confirmed that the Greek C can correspond to a consonant or semi-consonant cluster containing the phoneme ch at the end, and that the consonant that can precede ch is ch or likely k. The rest of possible combinations can be built up intuitively based on what was already said in this video. As for the letter psi, in another video we will try to confirm that the last consonant of the cluster represented by this letter can also be ch. We've said that the Wendish Inglik means angel, and we've supposed that the name of the river Inghul can mean the same. If the name of the Knyaz Ingor of Rus is Wendish and means angel, this could suggest that at least one of his parents should have been a Christian. The primary chronicle only knows that his father was the so-called Rurik, in the text itself Rurik. But if Rurik or Rurik was a personal name, it would rather be derived from the Polish noun rura or the Ukrainian noun rura, meaning pipe or tube. This pipe could imply a musical instrument. If the name Rurik were Ukrainian, that is, if it were Rurik, the suffix being ik, it could speak of its holder as a singing person or a person producing a melody, in other words, as of a Slav. Additionally, there is a Latin version regarding his name which suggests that the name could be formed from the Latin ruris, which is the genitive of the Latin rus. But I will not be considering it now. From the primary chronicle, we also know that Rurik had two brothers, Cineus and Truvor. In the list of all the three brothers, Rurik is placed first, Truvor is placed last. In all documents, it was common to list sons in the order from the eldest to the youngest. Moreover, in the primary chronicle, Rurik is explicitly designated as being the eldest, Cineus as the second son, Truvor as the third one. It means that Truvor was likely the youngest of them. But let's start from the name Cineus. Ukrainian native speakers will probably think that this word consists of two parts, but I doubt that this version is right. We know that Nestor, to compose the primary chronicle, communicated some knowledge preserved in Greek sources. If we try to reconstruct the Greek spelling of this name, Cineos, we will be able to consider a version that the original name could be the Ukrainian Sinyuk. This version is based on the idea that the Greek epsilon doesn't always represent a vowel, but can be used to palatalize the preceding consonant. Another word in which this effect can be witnessed is the name of a rapid of the river Borysthenes, written down by Constantine Porphyrogenetus as Leanti. Leanti is a transliteration of the Ukrainian or Russian name Lyanti, derived from the verb lyati or lite, and refers to, quote-unquote, high temperature. You can treat this information as a spoiler about another video. Now, the name Sinyuk denotes a bird known as the tit, the great tit, or the blue tit. It's only a version, but this version is in line with the name Rurik, assuming the latter is Slavic. The blue tit and sometimes the great tit are birds of blue and yellow color, like the color of the flag of Ukraine. And in this context, the sense of the third name, Truvor or Truvor in the Greek spelling, can look even more astounding. My first thought was that the original name was Trubar, the Ukrainian noun truba for pipe or tube, and thus trubar for trumpeter, like trubach. But then I had seen that maybe the original name could be Trivor or Trihor. If his name was trivor, I would derive it from the noun trivoga, meaning alarm or alert. If trigor, from the words tri, meaning three, and horite, meaning to burn or to flame, so that the whole word could mean three flamed. From the linguistic perspective, the last version is the best match, but there is a remarkable thing we can find out in all of them. All the versions may refer to fire at once. The noun trivoga, in my current view, could historically consist of two parts, tri for three, and vogony for fire. I've significantly simplified my thought to make it more clear. As today's trivoga means alarm or alert, I would consider a hypothesis that formally it denoted some visual signal given with something resembling, for example, a three-flamed candle. The English word candle can be cognate with the Ukrainian sandoля and or sandova, the meaning of which I will provide in another video. But I would focus our attention on the name Trigor, which seems to be more expected. The name can speak not only of the three flames, but of a link between its holder and some three-headed dragon, or the third head of some dragon. And the three heads of some dragon resemble a trident that is present, for example, on the coat of arms of Ukraine. There is a possibility, of course, that this version can turn out to be wrong. But I doubt that it's a coincidence, because the link between the person and the dragon is closely tied to the history of the Khazars and the Cimmerians. This topic will be covered another time. However, even without this knowledge, looking at the name Trigor, we can make the following assumption. From the perspective of the Ukrainian language, though the same logic applies in different Slavic languages, the noun gorlo, with the suffix and the ending being lo, meaning throat, and the verb horite, with the suffix and the ending being ite, meaning to burn or to flame, most likely share the same root, hor. From the perspective of the Slavic language family, the throat of the person can be the throat of the dragon, and this idea is supported by historical sources. We've not found a connection between the names Rurik and Ingor, and Rurik's name doesn't speak of him as a Christian. We either don't know a Christian name of Rurik if he was a Christian, or if Rurik wasn't a Christian, the mother of Ingor could be a Christian instead, but we cannot firmly confirm it. What if we look not at the father of Ingor, Rurik, but at his predecessor, the Knyaz Oleg? For some reason, this name is believed by some to be derived from the Old Norse Helgi, which means holy or sort of that. But if Oleg really meant holy, it would mean that he was baptized and should have probably borne a Christian name. The thing I will tell now will astonish some of you, because the Knyaz Oleg seems to have really been baptized. We will start from the point that the feminine analog of the name Oleg is Olha. In the Ukrainian society, it's known to everybody that Olya is a shortened form of the name Olga. Wiktionary doesn't show that, unfortunately. But at the same time, in the Polish society, and it's also known to everybody, the name Oля is a shortened form of another name, Alexandra, whose Ukrainian counterpart is Oleksandra. Furthermore, as written on English Wiktionary, the male name corresponding to the Polish Ola is Oleg, which, being a shortened form of the Polish Alexander, whose Ukrainian counterpart is Alexander, resembles the name Oleg or Oleg. Such names as Ola, Olga, Olha, Oleg, 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 Alexandra, Alexandra, Alexander, Alexander, Alexei, Alexei, Alex, Alexander, either in full or in their first part, are derived from the ancient Greek Alexo, I defend, I protect. Oleg was a Christian, he bore a baptized name, but a more surprising thing is that Oleg, according to the primary chronicle, really was the protector of the Knyaz Ingor or Ihor, while the latter was still young. Moreover, in the same chronicle, it's clearly stated that Oleg belonged to the Rurik family. If Rurik was a Slav, then Oleg was a Slav as well. The idea that Oleg was a Christian is supported by the Russian historian Andrei Yurievich Chernov, who provided his analysis in his work The Prophetic Oleg, the Baptism and the Death. In the original Russian, Veshchy Oleg, Krещение и Гибель, as can be inferred from this analysis, after he returned from Constantinople and was named prophetic in 906-907, according to the primary chronicle, he was already baptized. That Oleg highly likely became a Christian means that we should check whether Ingor or Ihor was baptized as well. Based on the primary chronicle, when the latter went to war against Byzantine for the first time, the treaty from 911-912, concluded by Oleg with the Greeks, was still in place. After Ihor lost this war and went again to take revenge in 943-944, Romanos I Lekapenos, in the primary chronicle Roman, offered him a tribute greater than the one that used to be previously given to Oleg. Ihor agreed. As the primary chronicle continues, in 944-945, Romanos I Lekapenos Constantine Porphyrogenetus and Stephen Lecapenus sent envoys to Igor in order to restore the former peace between Rus and Byzantine. Both the last peace treaty concluded by Oleg and the new one concluded by Igor were signed upon the Holy Cross. What is different, besides the main text, is that the treaty concluded by Oleg was also signed in the name of the Holy and Indivisible Trinity. In the new treaty, these words are absent. Here arises the following question. Was Igor ever a Christian? The primary chronicle conveys that before the new treaty was signed, he wasn't baptized yet. Then it reports that Igor and his retinue went after tribute to the Drevlans 2 times, in the chronicle to Dereva. After he asked some of his retinue to bring the collected tribute home and went with the rest of them back to the Drevlans for the 3rd time, the Drevlans killed him. This event describes Igor as a greedy person. In the Latin language, the word ingero means I pile up or I pour into, simply I accumulate, and in Antapodosis of Liutprand of Cremona, the name of this knyaz or king, Rex, is really recorded as Inger. So what has happened? The version number 1. Inger, greedy person, became baptized at some stage of his life. Number 2. Inger was his Latin nickname. Number 3. His original personal name, which we don't know, was translated into Latin as Inger. In either case, this name is more likely to be Latin than Wendish. And if it's not Wendish, we should doubt whether the name of Kiev really comes from a Wendish word. Perhaps Greek authors respelled the Latin suffix er and replaced it with the Greek omega rho or omicron rho, and then the Greek spelling simply transformed into the Church Slavonic Igor. Besides the attested Latin name Inger, this work of Liutprand tells us what the term Norman meant in the 10th century of the Common Era. The Russes were called Nordmani or Nordmani because they lived north of Constantinople and north of Cremona, which is located in present-day Italy. The Normanists believing in the Scandinavian origin of Rus seem to not even understand it. Liutprand doesn't say anything about Scandinavia. In the description you can find the link to a video made by Istoria Rusi in which he exposes a bit more details about the Norman myth. Olga of Kiev also likely was a Christian before she supposedly became Helena or Olena. In the Hypatian Codex and the Laurentian Codex, her name is recorded as Olena with the Cyrillic omega. Today, Olena is a name borne by some women in Ukraine. According to the ceremonies attributed to Constantine Porphyrogenetus, she visited Constantinople along with all Apocrysaires of Knyazes of Rus, and Apocrysaire is a sort of an ecclesiastical diplomat, her relatives, merchants, and a priest, Gregorius. The Soviet and Russian historian Boris Alexandrovich Rybakov, in his work The Birth of Rus, suggests Olga may have been baptized prior to her visit to Constantinople, that supposedly took place in 957. The Soviet and Russian historian Andrei Nikolaevich Sakharov, in his work Diplomacy of Ancient Rus, considers the possibility that Olga was baptized twice, the first time outside Constantinople and the second time in it. But both of them don't explain why she is mentioned by Constantine Porphyrogenetus by her non-Christian name. The possible answer is her name wasn't non-Christian. It's true that her name in the ceremonies is recorded as Elga, but this problem can also be resolved. We need to assume what was the male name that would likely correspond to the female Elga. Once we suppose that this name could be Eleg or Elek, we will be immediately able to find such a Greek word as elehos, which means control, check, audit. Audit is what pretty well describes Olga's personality, as she is known for reforming the tax collection system of Rus. The fact that the name Olena in Ukraine is a counterpart of the names Helen, Elena, Helena, etc. outside Ukraine, on the one hand, could hint why in the Greek sources we observe Elga, while in the Ruthenian sources Olga is written instead. But I would add one more version in regard to the first Greek name of Olga. Olga or Olga and Elga can be different names. In theory, Nestor could respell her name if at the moment when the chronicle was being written, the name Olga or Olga was very common among Christians in Rus. Today, it's impossible to meet a Ukrainian called Elga or Elha. However, the full and right answer as to why this spelling difference even exists is currently hard to provide. In the same work of Constantine Porphyrogenetus, we can see that the adjective Ruthenian is represented by the Greek rosene. In this regard, I have an extra thought that may help better understand the term Rus. The Ukrainian noun rozhen means pike. Its Polish counterpart, rozhen, means spit for cooking meat, and formerly did rapier, sword. These two words, each coming from its own language, expose a link between the sharp object and the fire, and this link may be important. The author of the Istoria Rusi channel has made a cycle of videos dedicated to the legend about three brothers, Rus, Czech, and Lech, in English Rus, Czech, and Lech. As the author of that channel narrates, this legend is based on the real events that took place in the late 3rd century of the Common Era, during the reign of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius Probus. In the description you will be able to find the links to his 3 videos of that cycle. If the sense of the name of the legendary person called Rus meant swordsman or knivesman, the meaning of the name of the legendary key can be related not to the Wendish kiyot, meaning flower, but to the Ukrainian key, meaning cudgel or staff. But the personal name, connected to some stuff, looks nonsensical, unless this stuff is a sword, for example. A thing that can etymologically connect the two meanings in the Polish word rożen, spit, and rapier, is a flaming sword or a flaming staff, whereas a possible link that can be noticed between the Ukrainian key and the Wendish kiyot is a flowering or a shining staff or sword. Rus and possibly key can be names denoting a flaming weapon in the form of a sword, a saber, or a knife, or a person being its bearer. That the meaning of the name Rus is connected to the swordsman is supported by the primary chronicle, in which there is a passage reading that the Ruses received their name from the Varangians, who were swordsmen. As you remember, the Wendish varang means sword. To summarize, we've started with the Rugians and have finished with Oleg being a Christian. We've also shown that the main representatives of the Ruthenian elite could be Slavs, starting from Rurik or Rurik. The Normanist myth about the Scandinavian origin of the so-called Rurikids, and especially of Rus and or the Ruses, can now be considered to be also debunked. But we've not understood what is the difference between the Rugians, the Ruthenians, and the Ruses. I think that the term Ruthenians, as well as the term Rugians, was initially applied to different Slavic tribes, including Polish-speaking people and maybe Russian-speaking and or Ukrainian-speaking people. This model could explain why at some stage the Ruses started to be called the Rugians and the Ruthenians. But as of the 2nd century of the Common Era, based on and referring to Ptolemy's Cosmographia, by the Rugians, and maybe or maybe not the Ruthenians, the Greek authors likely meant the Poles or people in whose language there was a word similar either to the Polish kwiat, flower, or the Polish wiać, to blow. The author of the Istoria Rusi channel, in his cycle of videos about Rus, Czech, and Lech, has expressed the point that the Rugians, whom he relates to the Ruses, adopted Aryan Christianity from the Goths, and that was the way Christianity first appeared in Rus. But I have to correct this model a bit. If the Rugians adopted Aryan Christianity from the Goths, the Ruses could adopt it either from the Rugians or directly from the Goths, separately from the Rugians. The idea that the Polish language could exist in the 2nd century of the Common Era as a separate language shouldn't be much surprising, and here's why. Herodotus mentions a tribe of Budinoi in the following context. The Budinoi are a very great and numerous race, and are all very blue-eyed and fair of skin. The ancient Greek pyros can be translated as flame-colored, yellowish-red, red-haired, red-headed, instead of fair of skin. And in their land is built a city of wood, the name of which is Gelonos, and each side of the wall is 30 furlongs in length and lofty at the same time, all being of wood. For the Gelonians are originally Hellenes, and they removed from the trading stations on the coast and settled among the Budinoi, and they use partly the Syrian language and partly the Hellenic. The Budinoi, however, do not use the same language as the Gelonians, nor is their manner of living the same. For the Budinoi are natives of the soil and a nomad people, and alone of the nations in these parts feed on fur counts, but the Gelonians are tillers of the ground and feed on corn and have gardens, and resemble them not at all either in appearance or in complexion of skin. However, by the Hellenes, the Budinoi also are called Gelonians, not being rightly so called. Their land is all thickly overgrown with forest of all kinds of trees, and in the thickest forest there is a large and deep lake, and around it marshy ground and reeds. We've said in the very first video that the name of the Budinoi, or in ancient Greek reading beta as Vodinoi, is Slavic. It means that this tribe could be Slavic-speaking as well. The word Gelonos, which should not be confused with the name of the Gelonians or other similar names outside the lines we've just read, resembles the Polish zielony, which means green, and thus its original name could be Zieloniec or Zielonek. According to Herodotus, they feed on fir cones, and their land is all thickly overgrown with forests. Into Polish, the word forest is translated as las. In the locative, las becomes lesie. A word derived from las is lach, in English lek, which is the name of the legendary lake and one of the names by which the Poles were formerly known. To compare, the word green in Belarusian is zelony, in Ukrainian is zeleny, in Slovak is zeleny, in Czech is zeleny. In Wendish, either green or green color, that is what is not clear, is grena. The tribe of the Vodinoi, unless Herodotus himself has mixed them up with the Gelonians, could be a Polish-speaking tribe or include a Polish-speaking tribe in the 5th century before the Common Era. Moreover, Herodotus doesn't say that their language was Scythian. This version is supported by one interesting observation. In comparison to Belarusian or Ukrainian, the Polish language sounds more sibilant. A good natural environment for wind to emit clear sibilant sounds is forests, and if some people, generation by generation, lived in forests for a very long time while their language was still developing, their speech, in my view, could get affected in the way the Polish language probably became so sibilant for the same occurrence. So what is the conclusion? The hypothetical split of the hypothetical Proto-Slavic language into several other Slavic languages, which then developed, either immediately or not, into Ukrainian, Russian, Belarusian, Polish, and so on, possibly occurred before the 5th century before the Common Era. In the modern Polish language, the tribe of Vodinoi would be called Wodzini, but why this name was written down as Vodinoi requires a separate analysis. When the Polish gentry believed that they were descended from the Sarmatians, they had at least some ground, while the Indo-Iranian myth about the mythical Indo-Iranian origin of the Scythians, Sauromations, Sarmatians, and all the rest on the list has no ground at all. The name of the Rugians likely shares the same etymology with the name Roxolani. Ptolemy places the Roxolani along with the Yazyges near the Mayotis, by which the Sea of Azov is usually meant. He also mentions the Scythian Alauni, dwelling somewhere near the Roxolani and the Yazyges. These Alauni are generally believed to be the Alans, and if it's true, it changes a lot. I believe Ukrainian native speakers understand what I mean. In this video, we will not be analyzing the language of the Alans, but one thing will be said just right now. The historical Alans, the real Alans, have nothing to do with today's Ossetians. It's also about one of the Indo-Iranian myths. Getting back to the Roxolani, Jordanes, who was born a few centuries after Ptolemy, placed them, roughly, on the territory of today's Romania. These Gotia, which our ancestors called Dacia and now, as I have said, is called Gepidia, was then bounded on the east by the Roxolani, on the west by the Yazyges, on the north by the Sarmatians and Basternai or Bastarnai, and on the south by the river Danube. The Yazyges are separated from the Roxolani by the Aluta river only. Somebody will connect the change of the location with the possible migration of the Roxolani. But I would also consider a version that this name could denote an occupation. The author of the Istoria Rusi channel thinks that the Roxolani are the Russes. There are reasons to think in this way. Some of them are expressed by this author in one of his videos, the link to which I have put in the description. Even if you don't understand what he says, you still can understand what is written on a couple of maps that he shows. In particular, on the map of Andreas Pograbius' Parti Sarmatiae Europae from 1570, Roxolania is a synonymous name for Rus Ruthenia, and on the map Sarmatiae Europae Delineatio of Philippus Brietius from 1649, Roxolania is depicted on the territory of present-day Ukraine. On my part, I will highlight only the main point. As the Roxolani was situated near the Sea of Azov in the 2nd century of the Common Era, they are expected to be either the Russians or the Ukrainians. The name of the mentioned Yazyges resembles today's Carpatho-Russian Yazyk, the Macedonian Yazyk, and the Serbo-Croatian Yazyk in the Chakavian region. All these words mean language or tongue. Thus, Yazyges means those who speak. The idea that the word Yazyges is Iranian, being what some people really believe, is what should have made me burst into laughter. I will not be even making any remarks about the persons suggesting this version. The word Roxolani contains the Latin x, which corresponds to the Greek xi. But in this case, it's not necessarily a voiceless cluster. Though the combination of two words the word Roxolani consists of may produce it, the last consonant of the first word is rather voiced. Roxolani can be the Ukrainian or Russian Roghcholyane. In modern Ukrainian, people would call such people Rogocholi instead. The Ukrainian word Rig and the Russian Rug mean horn. The word Cholo in the Ukrainian and Russian language means forehead. People that were called Roghcholyane can be those who have horns on their head. The Roxolani and the Rugians could be Slavic Vikings. In the English wiki article about the Vikings, there is a section titled Intermixing with the Slavs. The Vikings significantly intermixed with the Slavs. Slavic and Viking tribes were closely linked, fighting one another, intermixing and trading. In the Middle Ages, a significant amount of ware was transferred from Slavic areas to Scandinavia, and Denmark was a melting pot of Slavic and Scandinavian elements. The presence of Slavs in Scandinavia is more significant than previously thought. although the Slavs and their interaction with Scandinavia have not been adequately investigated. In the section Common Misconceptions, in the subsection Horned Helmets, we can read the following. Apart from 2 or 3 representations of ritual helmets, no depiction of the helmets of Viking warriors and no preserved helmet has horns. Historians, therefore, believe that Viking warriors did not wear horned helmets. Whether such helmets were used in Scandinavian culture for other ritual purposes remains unproven. The section Etymology provides a context for the term Viking. The etymology of Viking is uncertain. In the Middle Ages, it came to mean Scandinavian pirate or raider, while other names such as heathens, Danes, or Northmen were also used. As we remember, Liutprand called the Russes Nordmani or Nortmani. In Old English, the word Viking appears first in the Anglo-Saxon poem Widsith, which probably dates from the 9th century. In Old English and in the history of the Archbishops of Hamburg, Bremen, written by Adam of Bremen in about 1070, the term generally referred to Scandinavian pirates or raiders. As in the Old Norse usages, the term is not employed as a name for any people or culture in general. The word does not occur in any preserved Middle English text. The term Viking, that appeared in northwestern Germanic sources in the Viking Age, denoted pirates. According to some researchers, the term back then had no geographic or ethnic connotations that limited it to Scandinavia only. The term was instead used about anyone who to the Norse peoples appeared as a pirate. Therefore, the term had been used about Israelites on the Red Sea, Muslims encountering Scandinavians in the Mediterranean, Caucasian pirates encountering the famous Swedish Ingvar expedition, and Estonian pirates on the Baltic Sea. Thus, the term Viking was supposedly never limited to a single ethnicity as such, but rather an activity. Here Wiki refers to the work Vikings and the Viking Age of the historian John Howard Lind. I will not be reading all the lines because you can do it on your own if you wish, but I will notice several things. The primeval Vikings could be Slavs. According to Leo the Diacon, Sviatoslav was a Taurian and the Russes were the Taurocitians, the ancient Greek Taurus meaning bull. The so-called Bident of Sviatoslav, imprinted on his seal, is an image of an ox. We also know that the Bulgarians and the Avars had such Slavic titles as Tarhan or Tarkan, Vul, Vu, Vul, Volya, and so forth. The Khazars had the title Byk. These appellations, in general terms, mean ox, bull, or bullock, and they could serve as a reason why the Slavs or some of them could be called the Vikings by the Germanic foreigners. Another possible reason is that these Slavs were just cattle breeders or cattlemen, grazing their horned cattle. On the other hand, the second point could lead to the first. As the cattle breeders or cattlemen, these Slavs could develop the title system in which they found a place for such that relates to the ox. Though why the Vikings are usually imagined as people having horns on their head should be probably deeper analyzed. I will share my hypothesis about the meaning of the term Viking. The Latin vicinus means neighboring, but at the same time, the Latin word vicus, which vicinus is considered to derive from, means a village or farm. The term Viking, before it supposedly started to denote pirates, could at the beginning mean farmer or neighboring farmer, who could be the cattle breeder or the cattleman, and then it could start to mean neighbor or foreigner. I will not entirely cover this topic at this stage, but we now have at least some initial thoughts on this matter to continue with in future. The insufficient level of today's historical science is clearly evident and clearly reflected in the mess you can find, in particular on YouTube, in the form of the drivel, like some mythical Russia coming from some Scandinavia, though even the Russian historiography confirms at least that no Russia existed in that period. But who really cares? As nobody cares, this ignorance keeps evolving, and the people that spread such myths about the non-existing Russia or the Normalist myth participate, consciously or unconsciously, in distortion of history. They spread historical disinformation, the same as the Russian media spread their lies on TV and the internet. Just remember that. The result of spreading such lies can even be found in Kevin Allen Brooks' book The Jews of Khazaria. For example, Kevin Allen Brooks mentions a person named Rizhko, who was a tax collector living in Kiev during the 1480s. He has translated this name as East Slavic for red-haired. What is the so-called East Slavic language in the late 15th century is what he, of course, does not explain, notwithstanding that in that time there was the separate Ukrainian language and the separate Belarusian language, and the Russian language didn't exist yet. Moreover, a red-haired person in the Ukrainian language would rather be called Rudy than Ryzhy. But the crucial feature of this name is the stressed ending ko, which never existed in the Russian language. It's stressed because I, as a Ukrainian and Russian native speaker, can clearly see it. Such names are usually derived from verbs, and Rizhko is one of such examples. It's derived from the Ukrainian verb rizati, to cut, in which the letter z alternates with zhe. This person, as a tax collector, cut taxes out of the gross income. That's why he was called Rizhko, not because of his hair. Here I should give advice to some authors, especially to those in whose imaginary world the only language they are aware of is Russian. If you have found some word in some Russian dictionary, don't rush to claim it to be East Slavic, otherwise the result will be like this joke about Rizhko. At long last, we can return to the Cambridge document. We will now use it for a couple of things, to answer several scientific questions and to confirm that the Gets were most probably Slavs. Behold, I make it known to my lord that the name of our land as we found it in books is Arcanus, and the name of the royal city is Khazar, and the name of the river that passes through its midst is Atel, or Atil, or properly speaking, Hatil, and it is south of the sea that comes from, through which thy messengers came to Constantinople, and I believe that it starts from the Great Sea. But our province is distant from that sea, 2,160 rees, and between our land and Constantinople is 9 days by sea and 28 days by land, and the land of the dominion of my lord is 50 days. Behold, these are those who fight against or along with us: Asia, Bab al-Awwab, Zebus, Turkey. This Turkey doesn't necessarily refer to a Turkic people, at this stage we don't know yet, and Luzno. We already suggested in the previous video a possible sense for the name of the city of Khazar. The original word could be the Ukrainian Kozer, meaning royal suit. It's enough for us at the moment so we can switch to the rest of the coded piece. In one place in this fragment, several Hebrew letters have been lost. According to Pavel Kakovtsov, the whole word with the missing part was from your land. According to Solomon Schechter, it could be from the kingdom, but I would consider another, interesting version, from the Gulf or from the Bay. Also, in Solomon Schechter's translation, there is an error. In the original text, the author hasn't written south of the sea. He has written, literally, right of the sea. Pavel Kakovtsov also translates this place as right of the sea. And here is what we get now. And it is right of the sea that comes from the Gulf, from which thy messengers came to Constantinople. As we remember from the previous video, the Cambridge document was found in the Cairo, Geniza, that is present-day Egypt. The Gulf through which one can arrive in Constantinople from Egypt is the Sea of Marmara, which really starts from the Great Sea. The Great Sea is the Mediterranean Sea. Thus, the sea near which the Khazars dwelt, which is usually called the Khazar Sea, should be located between Constantinople and Khazaria. The fact is that there are two such seas, if we imagine them as two parts of a whole. The first one is the Black Sea. The second one is the Sea of Azov, which is connected to the former. And once we recall that the Khazars, according to Theophanos the Confessor, emerged from the land of Verzilia, next to the Sea of Azov, we will understand that the river Hatil is not the Volga. The river Hatil, first of all, is the river Don. But why has Solomon Schechter provided the wrong translation south of the sea instead of the right of the sea? He, as well as many other scholars, mistakenly believe that the so-called Khazar Sea is the Caspian Sea. But as we have just shown, that's not true. On Russian Wiki about the Khazar Sea, we can find a poorly described clarification of this mistaken belief. The hydronym first appeared in Arabic geographical writings from the 9th century, Ibn Hordad Beg and his successors Ibn al-Faqih and Qudama ibn Ja'far. The Khazar Sea used to be attributed to the Black Sea and less often to the Sea of Azov. At that time, the Khazars' position in Crimea was strong. Starting from the 10th century, the name was being established to designate the Caspian Sea. A less common variant of the name was Buhaira al-Khazar, the Khazar Lake, al-Muqaddasi. When Solomon Schechter translated the text, he likely imagined himself standing on the Volga's mouth and looking towards the Caspian Sea. For him, as an observer, the south coast of the Caspian Sea will be on the right, but in our case, I don't think we should imagine ourselves located on the river's mouth. As the Khazar Sea is the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea at one and the same time, on the right side of them will be the river Don, which is the Hatil River or part of it, according to the author of the Cambridge document. A confirmation of the fact that the Khazar Sea is both the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea can be found in the Russian translation of Ali Stakhri's work Roots of the Realms, provided by the Orientalist Nikolai Alexandrovich Karaulov in his series of books titled Knowledge of Arabic Authors about the Caucasus, Armenia and Azerbaijan. In the original Russian, сведения арабских писателей о Кавказе, Армении и Азербайджане. This sea doesn't join any other of the seas on the Earth's surface. Indeed, if someone goes around this sea, they will return to the point from which they began to go, and no obstacle will appear in their way, except for some freshwater river that flows into this sea. This sea is salty and is affected neither by rising nor by falling tide. The bottom of the sea is dark and silty, in contrast to the Sea of Kulzum. present-day Red Sea, and the entire Persian Sea, and in some places of the Persian Sea, its bottom is visible due to the purity of the white stones lying under its water. No precious stones are extracted from this sea, such as pearl or red coral, or anything else that is extracted from other seas. The only product of this sea is fish. Across it plied the merchants from the Muslim lands to the land of the Khazars and the regions of Aran, Judea, Tabaristan, and Georgian. Al-Istahri didn't differentiate well between the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, and maybe or maybe not the Caspian Sea. When he reports that the Sea of the Khazars is affected neither by rising nor by falling tide, he speaks of the Black Sea. Here is what the article about the Black Sea on Russian Wikipedia reads. It should be noted that due to the obstructive interchange of water with the Atlantic Ocean and the relatively small size of the sea itself, the magnitude of the Black Sea's tides is very small and can be indicated only by gauges. But when Al-Istahri reports that someone can go around the Khazar Sea and return to the same point, and that the bottom of the sea is dark and silty, he mainly speaks of the Sea of Azov, and when he says that it's salty, he speaks of the Black Sea. We can find the support for this point in the description of the Sea of Azov on Russian Wiki. The salinity of the sea before the Don River was brought under control was 3 times less than the average salinity of the ocean. Its value on the surface varied from 1 per milli at the mouth of the Don to 10.5 per milli in the central part of the sea and 11.5 per milli near the Kerch Strait. In the northern part of the Sea of Azov, the water contains very little salt. For this reason, the sea freezes easily, and therefore, before the invention of icebreakers, it wasn't navigable from December to mid-April. The southern part of the sea doesn't freeze and the temperature remains moderate. During the 20th century, almost all large rivers flowing into the Sea of Azov were dammed to create reservoirs. These led to a significant reduction in the discharge of fresh water and silt into the sea. Being 3 times less salty than in the ocean and many other seas, the water of the Sea of Azov, as well as the Baltic Sea, is practically harmless for quenching thirst for a short time in the absence of fresh water in emergencies. The transparency of the Sea of Azov's water is low. The influx of a large amount of turbid river waters, the fact that the bottom silt is rapidly stirred up when the sea rises in waves, and the presence of significant masses of plankton in the Azov water define its low transparency. Though the Sea of Azov could be that dark sea Al-Istahri writes about, the fact of its bottom's darkness was apparently preserved in the name of the Black Sea instead, and it could happen due to the confusion between these two seas back then. No precious stones are extracted from this sea, likely refers to the Sea of Azov as well, though this description is what can make some people think of the Caspian Sea. The thing is that the Hebrew Kaspi means financial, monetary, pecuniary, but the Caspian Sea could receive this name simply because of trade routes lying on it, not because of precious stones on its bottom, if such stones really ever existed there. Moreover, the name Kaspi is known at least as early as the 5th century before the Common Era. It can be found in Herodotus' history as a part of the name of the Caspian Sea and the tribe of Caspians. Yes, the Caspian Sea was known by the same name in the 5th century before the Common Era too. The easy freezing of the Sea of Azov near the Don's mouth is very well connected with the Scythian name of the Don Tanais, because Tanais is the Ukrainian appellation Tana, Tanaya or Tanya. Don't confuse it with the Greek female name Tatiana. It's derived from the verb tanuti, meaning to thaw or to melt. In such a context, the name Hatil also fits well, though the verb hatite has 2 senses which seem to be unrelated, to build a dike and to strike with force. In fact, they are likely related if we imagine this dike in the form of ice, which is a natural obstacle that has to be destroyed to pass it. Constantine Porphyrogenitus, in his De Administrando Imperio, mentions the river Etel and the river Kouzo, or probably Kouzos. The Romanian-born American archaeologist and historian Florin Curtin, in his book Eastern Europe in the Middle Ages, 500–1300, has expressed the point that Etel and Kouzo, which is Kouzos, are 2 different names of one and the same river. And that's a very interesting problem. It might have seemed that the river Etel is the Khazar river Hatil, and in fact, this assumption will be valid. But Constantine Porphyrogenitus speaks of a river that passes through the land of the Pechenegs, which is most likely the river Danube. When he wrote his work, he probably relied, as we already said previous time, on some information that came from foreign sources, for example, from those written in Arabic and/or Persian. Besides the fact that the Oriental authors of the 10th century confused the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov with the Caspian Sea, They also confused the rivers Danube, Don, and Volga. Given the fact that the river Volga, which was called Itil or Atil by some of these authors, runs to the western shore of the Caspian Sea, some features of this river were extended to the river Danube, which also runs to the western shore of the sea it flows into, which is the Black Sea. For example, a narrow strait at the side of the so-called Siyah Kuh, imagine it as an island, mentioned by Al-Istakhri in his Roots of the Realms, should have been regarded by us either as the Kerch Strait near the Don River, or as the Don River, or as the Volga River, but he also specifies that ships plying in this strait are in danger of crashing due to the wind. Such a description is characteristic of the Danube River. According to Ukrainian Wiki, on this river occur winds being very dangerous to navigation, and some types of winds can even affect the direction of the river's flow. For this reason, the Khazars call the river Danube the name Dunya or Duna from the Ukrainian verb dute, meaning to blow, and the Scythians call this river Vystrets, recorded as Istros in ancient Greek. The last name is a noun meaning sort of wind howling. It's compounded from the verb vite for to howl and the noun stri for wind. It's another spoiler. If that's the case, we can understand the next words of Al-Istakhri. As he continues, if a ship crashes, the debris will be captured by the so-called Turks. As well known from the Administrando Imperio of Constantine Porphyrogenetus, the so-called Turks, or properly Torks, back then migrated from about the territories belonging to the Finno-Ugric tribes to about the territory on the river Danube. As some scholars believe, these Turks, or properly Torks, in the text of Constantine Porphyrogenetus were most probably the Hungarians, and when Al-Istakhri also mentions some Turks or Torks that control lands located approximately near the Danube River, he, as well as Constantine Porphyrogenetus, most likely speaks of the Hungarians as well. And when Al-Istakhri, in the next lines, writes that the river Itil or Atil, which should have been the river Don, comes from the country of the Russes and the country of the Bulgarians, he speaks, just imagine, of the river Danube, the river Don, and apparently the river Volga at one and the same time. Al-Istakhri places the Bulgarians where they should be, that is on the river Danube, and he wasn't alone in doing this. Al-Mas'udi, in his work The Meadows of Gold, writes that the Nitas Sea and the Mayotis Sea as a single unit, which is the Black Sea along with the Sea of Azov, was known as the Sea of the Bulgarians and the Sea of the Russes. Al-Mas'udi knew that the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov are two different bodies of water, but he regards them as two parts of one sea, and applies the names of each of the water bodies to this whole sea consisting of the two, believing it is the right thing to do. To describe each water body separately, he calls one of them the Nitas Sea and the other the Mayotis Sea, but at this stage he confuses what is called what. That's why by the Mayotis Sea he can mean the Black Sea, and by the Nitas Sea the Sea of Azov. Al-Mas'udi himself believed that the Khazar Sea was the Caspian Sea. In his Meadows of Gold, he has even expressed his surprise at the fact that in his days there was an opinion that the Khazar Sea connected with the Mayotis, and even assumed that by the Khazar Sea those people meant the Sea of the Russes and the Bulgarians. By the Bulgarians, Al-Istakhri and Al-Mas'udi means the Slavic Bulgarians. In those texts that were translated and provided by Nikolai Karaulov, neither Al-Istakhri, nor Al-Mas'udi, nor even Ibn Hawkal, who also gave an account about the Bulgarians, neither of them, writing in the 10th century, mentions any Volga Bulgars. They mention only and exclusively the Slavic Bulgarians that lived on the Danube River. Moreover, the Bulgarians never were a Turkic people. They simply could not. Only those not thinking logically and those being falsifiers would suggest the Bulgarians are a Slavicized Turkic people. When I said logically, I meant that no historical source is required to understand it. No Turkic language is able to become any Slavic language. No Slavic language is able to become any Turkic language. It's nearly impossible. Today, such an event is even unlikely within a single language family. The Bulgarians were Slavic-speaking people in the past, and they remain them today. So, Kozos is the river of the Khazars. And do you know what? It's also a Ukrainian name. It relates to the verb kovzati, meaning to slide or to skate. The original name could be Kovzaya, Kovzets or Kovzany. In another video, we will see that the last option is what the Khazars themselves likely called this river. It will be proved on behalf of the Kovhan Joseph. But is this river the river Don, or does it at least include the Don as well? The answer seems to be positive. Al-Mas'udi, in his work The Meadows of Gold, mentions a stream that tends to completely freeze and is situated between the river Khazar and the channel of the Nitas Sea. The channel of the Nitas Sea is likely the Kerch Strait. The river Khazar in Al-Mas'udi's text is likely the river Volga. The geographical knowledge of Al-Mas'udi can be judged a total mess. Al-Mas'udi describes this river as large and watery, and as you may recall, its name may be somehow connected with the Hungarian Veld, meaning valley. In this case, the stream connecting the Kerch Strait with the Volga is likely the river Don, which tends to completely freeze and is called Kovzan, that is the slippery river, in the Khazar language. In another video, we will confirm one more time that the river Kovzan really formally referred at least to the Don River. We've reached almost the same conclusion as has Florin Curta, but the idea that the river Don could be a segment of the river Hatil and or the river Kovzan, or conversely, the idea that the Hatil and the Kovzan could be two segments of one river, or of something that was believed to be a river, can also be considered. If the Hatil and the Kovzan were adjacent segments of some one river, and the Kovzan river was the whole Don, for example, then the Hatil could be even the Kerch Strait. For some time, the Kerch Strait was really believed to be a river, but we can say almost unambiguously that it flowed, first of all, near the lands of present-day Ukraine, and is related, first of all, to the river Don. To support the last point, and that about the location of the Khazar Sea, we will refer to the Oriental author Ibn Hawqal. When he described the Khazar Sea, he wrote almost the same as did Ali Stakhri. In his work The Face of the Earth, he calls it either salty or calm. It depends on which edition is correct in this part, and adds that the Khazar Sea is stinky. What should be noted here is that Ali Stakhri's Roots of the Realms served as a basis for Ibn Hawqal's The Face of the Earth. Ali Stakhri thought that his maps contained errors, so he asked Ibn Hawqal, who traveled a lot, to correct them, though regarding the description of the Khazar Sea, nothing has much changed. Both the authors wrote their works in the 10th century, but while Ali Stakhri wrote his work supposedly before the Khazars were defeated by the Russes, approximately in 930, according to Nikolai Karaulov, Ibn Hawqal supposedly did after that, in about the 970s. Let's look at Ibn Hawqal's map of the Khazar Sea. I've rotated it in order for its head to point approximately north or northeast. We can see three rivers. One of them is related to the Hatil. Next to it, we can see a city of the same name spelled with the Arabic Alif, Ta, and Lam. The rest of the rivers are Nahr al-Ras, literally written as Nahr al-Ras, and Nahr al-Kur. Nahr al-Ras can be translated as the river Ras, and Nahr al-Kur as the river Kur. In the Arabic language, there is the word Ras, which has the senses leader, chief, chieftain. And if this interpretation of the river's name is right, we can connect it to that of the river Bug or Bog, whose name means God, because God is the chieftain. The river Kur, in this case, should correspond to the river Dnipro, whose Syrian name, Voristen, Vorestenets, Horisten or Horestenets, means the one crying rafts, the one crying monoxylons, or simply the one crying sorrow. And we can find the corresponding word in the Persian language. The Persian Kur means blind. If one gets a mote in one's eye, this eye stops to be able to see. If dust gets to one's eyes, one becomes blind, and while one is crying, one is temporarily unable to see as well. If the river is tears of some creature, the rafts floating down the river can be associated with motes the creature is trying to get rid of by crying. In the Ukrainian language, there is an expression, you see a mote in an eye of another's, but you don't notice a stump in your own. У чужім оці порошину бачиш, а своєму пенька не помічаєш. Which means, sort of, before looking for flaws in others, first pay attention to your own. What was the context for this phrase to appear is not clear, but we will presume this phrase to be somehow related to the Voristen or Vorestenets river. The river that connects the previous two mentioned can be a system of the rivers in Hul and in Hulech, though in fact there is no connection between them. Next on this map we can see two islands in the Khazar Sea. The first island is called Bab al-Awwab or Bab ul-Awwab, written in Arabic as Jazira Bab al-Awwab. The Arabic Bab al-Awwab is usually translated as Gate of the Gates, but the application of this name wasn't unambiguous. Oriental authors of the 10th century by Bab al-Awwab meant either a part of the Caucasus mountain massif or the Crimean peninsula. For example, Ibn Khordadbeh applied this name to ways out of the Caucasus mountains gorges, but in the case of the Crimean peninsula, Gate of the Gates can be reinterpreted as Port of the Ports, and this interpretation fits pretty well with Crimea as a port peninsula or a port island. The second island in this Khazar Sea is what actually confirmed that the Khazar Sea is the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov at once. Some scholars think that this inscription should be read as Siyah-Kuh and be translated from Persian as Black Mountain. In fact, the literal reading of this phrase is Jazira Siyah-Kuya, that is, the island of Siyah-Kuya. In my first video, which was mainly dedicated to the Syrian language, I've compared Siyah-Kuya to a combination of two Slavic words that looked similar. But if I had tried to build a hypothesis, or yet worse, a theory, based on this comparison, it would have finally failed. However, it's a good experience, because now you will see one more time that both the historical and linguistic science require approaches of sufficiently high precision. Present-day history and linguistics seem to not much and always satisfy this crucial requirement. The first part, siyah, really means black. This part of the translation is right, but the second part is not kuya. In the Persian alphabet, there are two letters that resemble the Arabic kaf. They are kaf and gaf. But if the Persian kaf directly corresponds to the Arabic kaf, an analog for the Persian gaf in the Arabic alphabet is just absent. In the case of loanwords, the phoneme g can be represented by the Arabic kaf, kaf, ghain, or jim, as the word kuya is expected to be Persian because siyah is Persian. The original first letter could be the Persian gaf. Whether on Ibn Hawqal's map the first letter is already Persian or is simply Arabic doesn't matter. What matters is that in the Persian language there is the word guya. It means capable of speech. Siyah guya means literally blackly speaking, and this interpretation is right, because this and the previous points make up a system of arguments convincing us much more stronger about the Khazar Sea. Siyah guya is the Taman Peninsula, on which there was the historical city or town known by the name of Tmutorokan, which means the same way literally blackly speaking as well. The first part refers to the word tma, meaning either darkness or great quantity. The second part is one of the following: Torochtite for to prattle, to chatter; Torkotate for to babble, to rumble; Turukati, Turkotate, Turkotite for to babble, to coo, to mutter. Tmutorokan can mean either speaking in many voices or speaking in no voice, because in darkness nobody speaks, it's scary, or speaking in a hissing voice, like a snake. Which option is right is not clear at this moment. According to Ali Stakhri and Ibn Hawqal, people didn't inhabit the islands in the Khazar Sea, including Siyah Guya. One of the spellings of Tmutorokan's name can be found in the Tale of Igor's campaign. In this source, it's present in the following forms: Tmutorokan, Tmutorokan, Tmutorakan. The last form can be rejected as mistaken because the first two are present in the primary chronicle. The third one is not. One passage from this tale mentions some Tmutorokansky Blavan. Among scholars of the so-called Russian Empire, there was an opinion that the historical Tmutorokan was the city or town of Ryazan. The author of the Historia Rusi channel has made several videos dedicated to the problem of when Ryazan really ceased to exist. The problem lies in the simple fact that Ryazan was not devastated in the 13th century and kept existing for several more centuries. This point is confirmed by various historical sources, which this person shows on his channel. The opposite point, that Ryazan was really devastated in the 13th century, is a clear example of the fact that today's Russian historiography has nothing to do with reality. On Wiki, including English Wiki, you will of course find this opposite point. Russian or Muscovitian lies can be found in different wiki articles, starting from those on politics, ending with those on history, from text to images. And if we add a human factor in the form of some individual's incapability of validating corrections and or checking primary sources, can we much rely on Wiki? Of course not. Wiki is not a source of the truth. Wiki is a source of the information, along with the disinformation and along with the lies. And because the historical sources can lie, Wiki can lie as well. The author of the Historia Rusi channel suggested that if Ryazan was really Tmutorokan, then this Blavan in the Tale of Igor's campaign can be a toponym Balvanovia, situated on a road that connected Moscow with Ryazan in the late 15th century. To explain that this version is possible, he refers to the fact that Tmutorokansky Blavan, according to the Tale of Igor's campaign and an existing interpretation of it, was a land unknown to the Russes. You can find more details by following the corresponding link in the description, but I will suggest a different view. Blavan resembles the Bulgarian word balvan, meaning boulder or big rock, and the Polish bałwan, meaning snowman. Regardless of whether it's a Bulgarian word, which is more expected, or Polish, in either case, this word apparently relates to the Caucasus Mountains, which is both the Tmutorokanian boulder and the Tmutorokanian snowman. As we remember, the Syrians called the Caucasus Mountains Kraukase, which means either white selvage or selvages of snow, or white brinks of snow. I have previously favored the second option, but there is a reason to consider the first option to be more appropriate. In the Arabic text of Ibn Hawqal's The Face of the Earth, provided by the Dutch Orientalist Michael Jan de Goeje in his Bibliotheca Geograporum Arabicorum, the name of the Caucasus Mountains is mainly spelled, except for some places in some of the editions mentioned in there, with three Arabic letters, Kaf, Ba, and Kaf. A word that seems to be the closest to this spelling and its reading is the Persian one, consisting of the Persian Kaf, Be, and Kaf. I've also underlined the word combination Siyah Guya or Siyah Guya on the slide. Kaf is a diminutive Persian suffix. Kaba is a Persian word for a long garment, a cloak, or a frock. The so-called kabk, as a Persian name for the Caucasus Mountains, can simply mean sort of thin long dress, and it's one more argument that the sense of the Scythian Kravkasi is white selvage. The fact that both the Persian and the Scythian names seem to relate to cloth is impossible to treat as a coincidence. There is one more thing the so-called Tmutarakanski Blevan may tell us. Qudama ibn Ja'far, in his Book of the Land Tax, mentions some Anushirvan ibn Kubad, probably being the Persian king Khosrow I Anushirvan, a son of Kavad I, who, according to Qudama ibn Ja'far, in order to prevent future attacks of the Khazars on Armenia, ordered to build a wall from blocks of stone and lead between some sea and the Caucasus Mountains, and then to throw stones into that sea until the embankment rises above the surface of the water. The final construction included an iron gate hung on this wall and a movable tower. Khosrow I Anushirvan is considered to be the person responsible for building the so-called Derbent Wall. What is called today the fortifications of Derbent is located near the Caspian Sea. But now we have a reason to raise a question about whether the historical Derbent Wall, built by the order of Khosrow I Anushirvan, is the same present-day Derbent, because the three black stones depicted on Ibn Hawkal's map can be this historical Derbent, and on this map, this Derbent is located west of or in the west of the Caucasus Mountains near the Khazar Sea, which is the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov as we already know. The problem of the historical Derbent should be definitely deeper analyzed. But regardless of whether these three black stones on the map are Derbent or not, they still can relate to the Tmutarakanski Blevan. I definitely suggest reading Qudama's Book of the Land Tax, especially to Ukrainians, because this source shows how Anushirvan won a victory over the Khazars. Anushirvan used against the Khazars the same weapon as that the Russian Federation is utilizing against Ukraine today on a much larger scale. A cautionary tale to learn from. A city that is considered to be Tmutarakan has also been mentioned by Constantine Porphyrogenitus in his De Administrando Imperio. It's commonly believed that Constantine Porphyrogenitus called it Tamatarha. The name could have been derived from the phrase Tamovate Torke, to restrain small rafts, Tamovate for to restrain and Torok for small raft. This version suggests a parallel between the name of the Taman Peninsula and Tamatarha. The word Tama meaning dam, dike or barrier, the name Taman could have denoted a place where some ships had or needed to stop. But in one place, Constantine Porphyrogenitus has written down this name as Tamartarha. In this spelling, the first part, Tamar, could refer to the verb tmarete, to make dark. The letter alpha can appear between two consonants before a syllable with another alpha for the same reason as iota can do before a syllable with iota. The variety of this name in Constantine's text prevents us from an ambiguous interpretation. But in Karl de Boer's Notitia Episcopatum, in the list of bishoprics, we can find one more similar appellation, Teumatarha, with a upsilon. If this upsilon was added in this name to just palatalize the preceding consonant, we should conclude that possibly Tmutorokan, Teumatarha, Tamartarha, and maybe Tamatarha are just one and the same name, literally meaning blackly speaking. However, there is yet another version for the name Tamatarha. To understand the idea I'm going to present, we need to cover one related topic, namely, what the so-called Kuyaba is. Kuyaba is believed to be a name for the city of Kiev. At the same time, we've concluded that the island of Siyah-Guya is the Taman Peninsula. Accepting the point that Kuyaba is Kiev, the following phrase from Ibn Hawkal's The Face of the Earth becomes meaningless. In the lands of the Russes, the Bulgarians, and the Kuyaba. Most probably, this Kuyaba is Kuban, or the Caucasus Mountains, so that the phrase should sound the following way. In the lands of the Russes, the Bulgarians, and Kuban. And now, the same phrase, but in accordance with the original text and with commentary. In the lands of the Bulgarians, which are the Danube Bulgarians, which are Slavs, the Russes, which are Slavs, and Kuyaba, which is Kuban. Kuyaba should be likely read as Guyaba. Guya means capable of speech. Ba is a Persian suffix meaning soup. This soup could have meant sort of great quantity, so that Guyaba meant great quantity of people, great quantity of voices, or great quantity of languages. As reported by Ibn Hawkal, there were 360 languages spread on the Caucasus Mountains, each spoken in its respective city or town. Siyah-Guya and Guyaba could have had the opposite senses. The former could have denoted the speechless peninsula of Taman in the Khazar Sea. The latter could have denoted the vast speechful plain of Kuban north of the Caucasus Mountains, or alternatively, the Caucasus Mountains proper. But the reality is much more complicated. According to Karl de Boer's Notitia Episcopatum, as we already said, Teumatarha was a bishopric. In modern Greek and or ancient Greek, there are words Tama and Archos. The first one means vow, oblation, votive offering, or ex voto. Its genitive is tamatos. The second one, archos, means ruler or leader. Combining these two pieces together, we will possibly receive sort of crucial or main place for oblations. Oblation is connected to the Christian sacrament of Eucharist, known as Lord's Supper. What may be relevant to us and can be used as a hint is that the English word supper is considered by some to derive from the word soup. Whether the context for the appearance of such a connection, if it does exist, was religious is hard to say right now, but this assumed connection paradoxically correlates with the following thought. The Last Supper, after which the term Lord's Supper emerged, was supposedly held on the evening or night before the Jesus Christ crucifixion day. While the name guyaba, literally meaning black soup, could refer to some meal eaten in the evening, the Eucharist entails sacramental bread and sacramental wine. Though the previous assumption about the great quantity can still apply, the name siyah guya, literally meaning blackly speaking, could refer to people saying prayers during the sacrament of Eucharist, also in the evening. An alternative view is that blackly meant sorrowly. The idea is based on the Eucharist's essence, which is to remind the faithful about Jesus Christ's sacrifice. Christianity started to be spread on the Taman Peninsula and or Kuban not later than the time of the emergence of the bishopric of Jumatarha, that is, not later than the 8th century of the Common Era. Therefore, the possibility that the name Tamatarha is really related to Christianity should not be surprising. Next on Ibn Hawkal's map, we can find a toponym that we can refer to the so-called Barda, which I've also compared to a Slavic word in my first video. There does exist a context in which the name Barda can be considered as Ukrainian, but this context is not to do with this map. The word written down on the map can be interpreted as the Arabic Barda, meaning pack saddle. But whether the original word was somehow connected to any pack saddle or pack saddles is a subject to a more detailed investigation. I will only guess that this Barda may refer to the present-day port city of Berdyansk in southeastern Ukraine. In the previous video, we've said that the two leaders of Khazaria had the two Ukrainian titles, Kovhan and Byk, and we will prove it now strongly. In the work Roots of the Realms of Ali Stakhri, we can find the following piece. The king is called in their language Bek, and he is also called Bak. The so-called title Bek is spelled only with two Arabic letters, Ba and Kaf. It means that the vowel between these two consonants can be any, so the Ukrainian Byk can be a valid version. But the second word is not Bak. In the text of Yakut al-Hamavi, this title is written down as Yak. In Nikolai Karaulov's copy of the Arabic text, this title is also written as Yak. The thing is that in the Arabic alphabet the letters Ba and Ya can be easily confused because the only difference between them is one dot. The word yak is found in different languages and denotes an ox-like mammal. In Latin some of its species are called bos. And as we remember, the Ukrainian word byk also means ox, so we've not been mistaken. But what about the second title? Ali Stakhri writes, when some grave peril befalls them, the Khazars, they, the Khazars, bring the Hakan, and as soon as someone from the Turks, not clear who they are, or the neighboring peoples of the Kafirs sees him. According to Nikolai Karaulov, these Kafirs are those not being Muslims, nor Jews, nor Christians by religion. They immediately turn to flight, and none of them dares to fight against him because of the great respect for him. Without an additional context, this passage doesn't seem to tell us much. Let's now look into the work of Al-Mas'udi. When the king wages a war against Muslims, they, the Muslims of Khazaria, stay separately in his camp and do not fight against the co-religionists, but fight together with the king against other Kafir peoples. So the Khazars could fight against Muslims outside Khazaria, but it's still not enough. Yet another passage from the work of Ali Stakhri. I was told by one person, whom I trust on this, that he saw a young man selling bread in one of their markets, and Khazars said that after the death of their Hakan, no one would have more rights to be a Hakan than this young man, unless he is a Muslim, because the right to be a Hakan is given only to those who profess the Jewish religion. For some reason, Ali Stakhri hasn't said what would happen if this young man were a Christian, though we might have expected that the Christian also could not be a Hakan, because only adherents to the Jewish religion had this right, according to Ali Stakhri. The fact that he puts an emphasis on Muslims seems to be expected and clear, but there is one detail. In the first passage I've quoted, Ali Stakhri speaks of the so-called Turks and the Kafir peoples discreetly. If we assume that these Turks were Muslims, we will reach a possible answer why they ran away once they saw the Hakan, which is the Kovhan. As we remember, the Ukrainian word Kovhan means wild boar. For Muslims, the pig could be a symbol of death. That may explain why at some stage they ceased using it for food. Here I should add that the problem of Muslims' taboo on eating swine became a subject for debate among scholars, and the public appearance of the Kovhan could be a sign for them that they will anyway die, if not at the battle, then after the battle. Of course, we don't see the full picture. We don't understand what even made it possible that the Turks and even Kafir peoples were so much scared of the Kovhan if Ali Stakri's account is true. But this version notwithstanding, in my view, is the second nice shot. The Khazars indeed had 2 Ukrainian titles. But why in Arabic text is this title recorded as Hakan and the word Kozar as Khazar? It might be a transliteration tradition according to which the Hebrew kaf, pronounced either k or h, could tend to be respelled as the Arabic ha, the Hebrew kof as the Arabic ha, similar in pronunciation. The Hebrew gimel is either the Arabic kaf, whose medial form looks similar to its Hebrew counterpart, with a subsequent replacement with the Arabic kaf, or directly as the Arabic kaf. The latter representation of such phonemes as k, h, h, g, g, h, etc. is usually unpredictable, and such words as Kozar and Kovhan fall into this precise case. In the previous video, I've also expressed a view that the original name of Koktebel was Buhtibel and shown a scheme of how the original name could be misread or miscopied based on its possible original spelling in Hebrew. But now I will suggest a version that looks much closer to, and possibly is, the right answer. This toponym may have nothing to do with the Khazars and could develop from the Crimean Tatar Kyokchebel, consisting of Kyokche for bluish-white and Bel for spit. We are now looking into the online bidirectional Crimean Tatar to Russian dictionary on the portal medeniye.org/lugat. And this version supports even much stronger the point that the name Kyokchebel, bluish-white spit, was indeed initially applied to Cape Chameleon, Miss Chameleon. In the same dictionary, we can find an interesting Crimean Tatar word kaz, which is translated into the Russian goose, meaning goose. Interestingly, why in the Russian language, in the so-called Russian Empire, was the term Cossack initially written as Kozak, and why then did it start to be written as Kazakh? And what is the connection between the Russian word gusar, in English Khazar, and the Russian Kazakh, which contrary to the Ukrainian language may have the Turkic root kaz? Very interesting. Now we can switch to the gets. The question is, how can the Cambridge document relate them to Slavs? Directly there is no way to do so, but the document contains one word that can be a part of one puzzle supporting this course of thoughts. This word is arcanus. The Latin adjective arcanus means secret, hidden, or mysterious. The hypothesis that the author of the document has spelled the Latin word with Hebrew letters cannot be simply left out, but in addition, I would consider a different view because, at first glance, it seems doubtful that the lands of a people or tribe could be named by anybody in this way. I think that this arcanus could be the Ukrainian gharkany, derived from the verbs gharkati and harchati, meaning to growl or to snarl. This verb is perceived first of all as that referring to dogs, but it's not just a coincidence. In Pliny the Elder's Naturalis Historia, in the same fragment, in the same editions we already saw in the very first video, we can find out that the Persians called the Syrians Sagas, not Sakas. In the earliest editions, the copyists have written down this name as Sagas. Here I should wave my hello to those Indo-Iranian fantasizers who connect the Syrians to the Sakai. They will be very happy right now because the original word written in Latin as Sagas most probably corresponds to the Persian word Sag, meaning dog. Let's make them even more happy. In the Ukrainian language, there is an interjection ret, used to set a dog on, but the most interesting part is that besides this interjection, in the Dictionary of Ukrainian Scientific and Vernacular Names for Vascular Plants from 2004, compiled by the Ukrainian botanist Yuri Kombiv, we can find a mention of a plant called hechi-pechi, the Ukrainian peach or pechi meaning stove. The Latin name for this plant is Rosa canina. The English name is dog rose. This plant, as well as other types of rose, have thorns which can be treated as teeth of some animal, for example a dog or a wolf. It could be a reason why in Latin and in English this plant was named respectively Rosa canina and dog rose. The term hechi-pechi can be interpreted as a canine stove, or stove of the dog's or the wolf's teeth. And there is a logic behind such a name. Once one's hand is stung with thorns, one will feel pain like a dog has bitten it, or like one has put it in a stove in which instead of fire, one's hand has collided with the teeth of some animal like a dog or a wolf. That's how it can be figuratively imagined. One important thing in this idea is that in another video I will present my vision in regard to the etymology of the name of one character of one Ukrainian fairy tale. But now we can conclude that we have confirmed what we wanted to confirm. The guests were probably Slavs. So Philip Orlik's constitution seems to read the truth about the Cossacks' origin. The word het most probably meant dog, wolf, or tooth. In modern Ukrainian, it seems to not have been preserved as a single term, but there are languages in which a similar word can be found, for example, those belonging to the Turkic family. In the Bashkir and Tatar language, dog will be translated as et. Of course, it doesn't mean that we need to consider the Gets as a Turkic people. First of all, the first phoneme in the original word has to be the consonant g, g, h, or one of their variations, and we've found derivative words in the Ukrainian language. Second, historical sources deny a possibility that the Gets were a group of Turkic people, and we've partly justified this just right now. Moreover, in another video, I hope it will be the next one, we will see, I will show that the Massagetae were likely Slavic-speaking people as well. The ancient Ukrainian word het could possibly survive in the Cossack title Hetman. If so, the second part should also be Ukrainian, or at least Slavic. For example, it can be the Ukrainian verb maniti, meaning to beckon. The root is man. If that's the case, a hetman can literally mean the one who beckons dogs or wolves. In other words, denote a person followed by soldiers who was a leader of dogs or wolves. In such a context, the fact that the Huns had the title Vivhura, meaning wolfman, and the fact that in the Ruthenian poem Marusia Boguslavka, conveyed to us by the Ukrainian writer Panteleimon Kulish, the cognate term Vovhura was applied to the Cossacks, receive a completely new angle. We can perceive now way differently the fact that the name of the island of Small Khortytsia relates to a female greyhound. We can view now way differently the fact that the Greeks probably thought the territory of Ukraine and possibly Kuban was the body of Zeus Lucaius, whose name is translated as Wool Zeus. When I was a child, every time I saw the map of Ukraine, the silhouette of its borders always reminded me of a dog. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe not. But the fact that we find way too many dogs and or wolves in the history of Ukraine cannot be ignored. This list, by the way, is not complete. To the people deriving the term hetman from the German Hauptmann without critically thinking, I would advise to answer the following questions. Can you name the primary source suggesting this idea for the first time? What historical event could make it happen? And how was this idea proved linguistically? I'm almost sure that the vast majority of those people will be able to answer not a single one of these questions. In the next video, we will find out more evidences that the Khazar language is Ukrainian. Besides, and I hope it will be also included in the next video, we will reveal that the history of the Khazars is much more closely linked to the history of the Scythians than it looks at first sight, and dates back to the pre-Scythian, if not to an earlier epoch. It was Daniel Haidachuk, also known as Daniel Poiron.